Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to EnergyTech Annual. This is a very special collaboration between Barclays Eagle Labs, Codebase and Opportunity Northeast. And it's my honor to be your host, your MC, if you like, for proceedings. I'm Ollie Barrett. And my goodness, the first time we got together like this, when we launched the program back in 2020. In some ways, it seems like 10 years ago. In other ways, it seems like about 6 days ago. Whether you're joining us for the first time or rejoining, you're very welcome. And especially if you're watching live, thank you for being here on this afternoon session. We've got lots and lots to get through. And the program really, if I could boil it down, it's about connection, this EnergyTech program. It's connecting the incumbents in the energy tech space with the startups of today and tomorrow. Why? Well, it's to ensure better access to those startups, but it's also about digital transformation, speeding things up for some of the biggest companies in the UK and in the world. So if you're watching live this afternoon, thank you for tuning in. You can make comments at any time and ask questions using the chat and the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We won't take questions during the opening and closing keynotes, but you can, of course, keep your comments coming throughout, and I'll try and do my best to channel what's on your minds to our speakers. Well, I've absolutely loved collaborating with the team on this one, so it's a great pleasure to welcome to our virtual screens the director of Barclays Eagle Labs, and that, of course, is John Hope. John, a very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ollie. Thanks for the warm welcome, and welcome to everybody to today's event. As Ollie suggested, I lead Barclays Eagle Lab program, and we're a network of business incubators and programs that's aim is really to interconnect the entrepreneurial ecosystem to help it connect, innovate, and grow. And whilst we support innovative startups from all sectors, we do have a number of programs and partnerships around industries of significant economic and societal importance. And one of those industries is energy. I'm sure I don't need to remind anybody that the climate catastrophe is arguably the greatest challenge facing us today, but also that innovation is and is going to continue to be essential to the energy transition. We strongly believe that collaboration between incumbents, startups, academics and engineers is going to be essential to the success of innovation. And our ambition for EnergyTech is really to build a community of innovators with deep domain expertise alongside startups who are working on disruptive technologies. We're really proud to have partnered with Codebase and Opportunity Northeast to deliver EnergyTech Bridge, and even more excited to track the success of bringing together energy tech startups alongside the incumbents. So if you're new to EnergyTech, the energy tech community, welcome. And if you're coming back, I want to thank you for your continued participation. We are well, I'm personally super excited to hear from our fabulous panel of speakers today, and whether we're hearing about breakthrough technologies, macro trends, industry challenges, barriers to entry, or opportunities for transformation. I'm sure we'll hear it all, and hopefully, the exchanges and discussion you will have will provide some value to you, irrespective of your type of organisation, shape, or size as well. So do let us know how we can continue to evolve and improve the programme. Enjoy today and hope to speak to you all soon. So, Ollie, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, John. That's John Hope, Director of Barclays Eagle Labs, and really looking forward to comparing notes with everybody as we go through. So please keep those questions coming. Right, I thought I'd give you a quick flavour of what's in store. I think you can get a sense of my excitement because I've had calls with all of our contributors today, and it's a phenomenal lineup. Right. I'm going to be asking one of our panels, what gets in the way? If you're trying to scale a technology, what bogs you down? Is it money? Is it people? Is it dealing with very large companies? Heaven forbid. Well, I'll ask them firsthand. What about robotics? What about the jobs that are too dirty or dangerous for humans to do? What does the cutting edge of that look like? And here's a question for you. Have you ever been told something's impossible, can't be done? In the time frame, with the money, maybe the technology simply doesn't exist. Well, that will be the theme of another of our panels. And finally, what about that term micromobility that we hear everywhere referring to scooters or bicycles all around the world? I'll be interviewing or hearing from the person that coined that term. Horace Deju is in the house, in the virtual house, I should say. But first, we're going to meet somebody very special indeed, returning to our Barclays EnergyTech circle. We first met Bob Mumgard back in 2020. He was well on his way on an extraordinary journey leading Commonwealth fusion systems. Have a look at cfs.energy. He takes his inspiration from the stars, you'll hear why, and I think it's fair to say that it's been quite an adventure since we last spoke on the path to limitless clean energy. Bob Mumgard, welcome to EnergyTech Annual.
Ollie, great to be here. Great to be back.
Now, our guest can tell, or might guess, you're beaming in via the United States, am I right?
That's right. Yep. Just outside of Boston.
Good. Massachusetts on the East Coast. Good to see you again, Bob. Now, forgive me if I insult the viewer at any point, but I'm going to take us back into the classroom. Give us our quick reminder on fusion. You're smashing together atoms. Tell us, just give us the 101, just to get us back on the page.
Right. So, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is energy. And when you run and look at the whole universe, the universe gets almost all of its energy from the combining of light atoms into heavier atoms inside the stars through a process called fusion. And that makes about 200 million times more energy per reaction than, say, burning a fossil fuel. And so that means that the stars can last for billions of years. And once we realized that about 100 years ago, humanity's like, well, it'd be really nice to have that on Earth, because it would totally change how we thought about energy. We would go from a world where we were about resources and finding the right constituents to a world where we were about finding the right technologies. That's a big shift. So people have been working on this for a very long time to be able to basically build a machine that can actually create those same reactions inside the stars, but on Earth, and then harness that resulting energy to be put to useful stuff. And what Commonwealth Fusion Systems is a company that spun out of university research and government-funded research. And it's one of many companies in this space really trying very hard to, as quickly as possible, bring this energy source to practical implementation in time for climate change.
So, Bob, I want to understand more about where you are on the journey. But first, let's just be crystal clear. Give me a sense of the size of the prize. This is limitless energy, and presumably without any of the concerns of waste, of some of the very sadly famous side effects that have gone with other techniques in the past.
And right, so this is a fundamentally new type of energy, right? And every time that humanity has figured out how to harness a new type of energy, whether that's like domesticating, plow animals, or finding coal, or renewable energies today, we've seen big shifts, really, really big shifts in markets and how people live and what they're capable of doing. And it's really been the heart, that sort of increasing access to energy has been the thing that has propelled so much of what we take for granted today. Yeah. And in energy, with fusion, what you're doing is you're using, a fuel that everyone has access to. So you'll never run out. It's inexhaustible. It's the stuff that's in seawater. And you're doing it in a machine that makes a lot of power in a relatively small amount of space. So that means you could build it anywhere. You're not limited by the resources that happen to be around you. And you can turn it on, you can turn it off. And it doesn't have any emissions, and it doesn't have any uranium or plutonium, no chain reaction, and therefore no meltdown or long-lived waste. So it's got a lot of these things that are all really, really good. And that's why people have been working on it so hard for so long. People are excited about it. It also happens to be very, very hard. And so that's also why you see companies like Commonwealth attempting it.
Right. And give us a sense, Bob, of where you are on the journey. And by the way, are your closest commentators and critics now saying Bob and the team have got this now? Or have you still got people saying you won't do it, you'll never do it?
Well, I thought what was interesting about this session is talking about, what's impossible. And when you think about technologies, oftentimes they go from impossible to inevitable really quickly. And you can find famous quotes from famous scientists about flight when the Wright brothers were flying. In fusion's case, it's actually broadly seen as this is possible. We know this is possible. We understand the stars. And in fact, the governments have been working towards it and are building a very large machine in the south of France, which is aimed to turn on in about 2035 and generate more energy out than in. And that's really the next key step, is nobody yet has generated more energy than it took to start the reaction. But we've gotten really close. And we've gotten there faster than like Moore's law. And so you have all these scientific endeavors screaming up to the point of being useful. And that's a good trend to be writing. And in CFS's case, we're based on the most studied, most scientifically demonstrated approach to making fusion power, and something called a tokamak, which is one of these words that no one will know, but someday maybe lots of people will know. We're now building a machine just west of where I am to make more power out than in for the first time. And a year ago, we weren't building that machine. We were doing R&D on some of the pieces. Now that's done, and now we're on with it.
Yeah, so in real terms then, and that machine is no small thing, it's over 40 acres in size, but just to put it even more bluntly, Bob, when are we going to see fusion, feeding into the grid? Give us your best guess.
Yeah, so we think that actually the fusion industry, which is about 30 companies, about $4 billion invested into that industry right now, did a survey, and the vast majority thought that we'd see fusion demonstrated, meaning like a laboratory scale demonstration, in the mid 2020s, which is our timeline as well, 2025 in our case. And then on the grid in the early 2030s. So this is not a technology that's next year, but it's also not a technology that's decades and decades away. It's in that spot where it's close enough to make a difference, but still far enough away that like we don't exactly know how it's going to go.
Yeah, it's also good to think that some companies reckon they can just about get rid of use of plastic cups by 2030, and you think you can change the face of the energy world.
Yeah, different scale of innovation.
Indeed. So we want to know some of the secrets. You've already piqued our audience interest because questions are starting to fly in. We met in 2020. Just tell us what the last year has involved. I'll get us started. You've raised another significant amount of money, $1.8 billion. Your backers include Bill Gates, George Soros, and many others. Tell us why you need that much money and the single biggest lesson you've learned about raising such an incredible sum.
Well, lots have changed in the last year. So, within the company has more than doubled. We're now about 200 employees, and we add in all of our collaborators, which we work with places like MIT and national labs. It's about 300 right now, and we'll double again this year. And we've demonstrated the key new breakthrough technology that enables us to build these machines, which is a new type of magnet, basically a magnet that's twice as powerful as any magnet that had been done before. And that was a huge milestone. And that gave us the confidence to actually start the construction of the net energy machine that we're building now, a machine we call Spark. But this has all happened on a backdrop, I think, that we can't ignore, which is the move into really the private sector understanding what the climate catastrophe is going to involve, not just from a downside standpoint, but from an upside standpoint. That there will be a class of companies that are created that will shape the future composition of how the world works as we systematically go through every single industry and decarbonize. And so, that has led to, record funding rounds. CFS's case, that's been very, very helpful. And we're going to deploy that over the next 5 years to demonstrate net energy. But it's also led to a really great climate for entrepreneurs in the energy space and for incumbents to reassess how they're going to behave in this space. In our case, we have E&I and Equinor as major investors. And so it's been a very exciting time. And I think, if you were to ask me a year ago how fast we would see the broader market shift, not just in fusion, but in sustainability companies overall, I would underestimate what has happened.
And so what about the biggest lesson, Bob? What have you learned?
The power of being audacious, right? So the scale of what we have in front of us globally is so massive. And I think we saw that when, the politics at COP, weren't able to fully grasp it. But because there's this big scale out there of a problem, it's also a really big opportunity. And we've learned that if you're audacious and you have a really good plan, you can reach really, really far. That this big transition that is going to happen means that your opportunities are really limited by your audacity more than they are limited by anything else.
Great lessons. So here's a question. Stephen asks, Bob, what's the hardest problem in fusion? And we could talk for a very long time, but I'm going to ask you to be pithy in your response.
Yeah, it's you could boil it down to all sorts of technical problems, but fundamentally, you have to bring together all sorts of different types of people. You often underestimate that in technology. Technology is not just hardware or science. It's a story, and it's a story told by everyone from engineers and scientists to policymakers to the neighbors. We had to go out and convince neighbors to let us build this machine. And so that interdisciplinary part of it is really hard and often underlooked in any of these innovations.
Yeah, so let's take one example of that. What's your quick analysis on where the governments and related people of the world are when it comes to their attitudes towards fusion? I mean, here in the UK, we only need to go across the English Channel, do the French call it the French Channel, probably, to see 70% plus of their energy coming from nuclear. Give us a sense of global appetite.
Yeah, so interestingly, it's really, really important to recognize that fusion is new. It's not nuclear power. It's only shares the fact that it rearranges the nucleus with nuclear power. It has none of the other stuff in it. And so by being new, it means that people are open to understanding it. There's some misconceptions based on comic books and science fiction. You have some of that as tailwinds and some of that as headwinds. But in general, governments are more and more aggressively pursuing this. The UK just announced this year as part of their broad energy push that they want to be first in fusion, and they're building a plant in, I think they've announced in Scotland. And the Chinese have a very large program. The Japanese Prime Minister just a couple of weeks ago announced that they intend to be a leader in it. The U.S. government still figuring out what they want to do. We're trying to make sure that the U.S. stays a leader in the space. So it's an exciting time. We see a lot of shifts, partly driven by the private sector, companies like us, partly driven by the science, partly driven by the moment.
I mean, Bob, it does slightly lead to the question, given the size of the prize, given the power players that you've just named in that answer, to what extent have we got the organizations we'll need to regulate, support all that you and your fellow entrepreneurs are cooking up?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so from a regulatory standpoint, people are starting to figure that out. It's a question of how do you regulate a new technology? You don't want to use the rules that are built for other technologies to do this one. And so the UK has actually came up with a regulatory framework they've proposed that regulates it according to its hazards, which is the right way to think about it. And that's out for public comments. That's exciting. US is on a similar trajectory. The workforce, this is an energy technology, which is kind of like building a coal power plant without all the coal. At the heart of it, it's a boiler, star in a bottle, which gets all the attention. But the rest of the plant looks very much like how we get the vast majority of our energy today. So that means from a workforce standpoint, a lot of the workforce is existing and can be utilized and brought in. So there's pieces of this that are new that have to be thought through. And then there's a lot of pieces that are a little bit different, and we have to think about how to shift them. But we're starting to see people, see what all the misalignments are, at least at this stage. And that's the first step to making alignment.
Right. So you're getting some flack here from one of our audience, Bob. It says, 65 years ago, I was told it would be 50 years to fusion. That's Philip saying that. So you're 15 minutes late. What's kept you?
Well, I would argue that the Icarus story is 1,000 years ago, and we got flight in 1906. And are we upset that it was too late? It takes time to figure this stuff out. Right. And it's hard to predict these technologies.
Stay on that. Well, thank you, Philip, for keeping us on our toes. Bob, on a serious note, you mentioned misconceptions. Why don't you bust a couple of those myths here today?
Well, there's a misconception. It's nuclear power. We talked about that before. Nothing to do with nuclear power. It's a unique energy source. The stars have no uranium or plutonium in them. And so that's a big one. There's a misconception that because we haven't got it yet means we won't ever get it, which I think, speaks to Philip's comment here, which, we see that oftentimes in technologies. AI today, I remember the AI winter when we're like AI, it's total bust. And now look what it's done for lots of different things, good and bad. And so, you have to keep an open mind and constantly reevaluate. And at the same time, the challenge we have is going to require new ideas, new ways to scale. And we can't get going fast enough.
Right. So let's go a bit quick fire. Let's shift gear, Bob. What do you say to the startup tuning in who keeps being told getting into what you're doing, you'll never succeed because you're trying to take on some multi-billion-dollar companies with deeper pockets, more talent than you can ever imagine. So why bother getting started? You were that startup not so long ago.
Yeah, so don't listen to them. I mean, if we would have listened to people, we wouldn't have ever started. Instead, go back to first principles, right? The first principles of like, why is this technology needed? You know, why is this technology valuable? Who stands to gain? Who stands to lose? And really have lots of conversations about those principles. And eventually you'll find the people that agree that, yeah, you know, the first principles are going to win out in the long run, and they'll back you.
Right. But by the same token, what do you say to someone from a much larger organization? And I'm going to generalize, but they say, we want to embrace innovation. We want to be more entrepreneurial, and yet we find it hard for a multitude of reasons. How do we not get left behind? I'm putting it bluntly, but I'm channeling what I know is on the mind of one or two of our guests.
Yeah, it's a really tough problem. I'm not an expert in large organizations. I'm much more in a small organization side, but from my point of view on the other side of the table sometimes, part of it is, you know, you got to really check what the buy-in is all up and down. There's a lot of organizations, there's some part of the organization that wants to be innovative, but until the whole organization you know, knows what it's up against and what its opportunity is and is aligned, it's really hard to make those seeds grow. You can plant a lot of seeds, but the trees grow out of really good alignment.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. Well, tuning in, particularly if you're tuning in live, keep your questions coming. This is Bob Mumgard, Chief Exec of Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Bob, I've got a question about what I'm going to call your competitors. Jeff Bezos has backed certainly at least one company in this space. Now, who was that? General Fusion, of course. How do you view those competitors? How much time do you spend looking at them? And to what extent is there a sense of camaraderie among you all?
Yeah, you know, I think the important thing to realize in the energy market is that it's really, really, really big. And so that means there's enough for everybody, for sure, for every energy technologies, whether that's, you know, the companies inside Fusion or Fusion versus like long duration storage or any of those. And two, to recognize the energy transition, the real competition is time. There's enough capital out there. There's enough ideas out there. There's enough talent out there. The competition is really the clock. And so I try to keep that viewpoint of like, what can CFS be doing to move forward as quickly as possible, and less about, you know, what others are doing. And certainly nothing around, competing against others with any idea of how to outmaneuver them or things like that. You know, the space is so wide open in the energy transition. Go and seize it. And I think that pervades not just the fusion companies who get along and coordinate and around policy and you know, workforce and supply chain. But I think that attitude actually pervades almost all of the energy innovation sectors. So, you know, we have good relationships with long duration storage or hydrogen companies and deep geothermal, because the scale of the problem is so massive that anything that looks like it's a solution at the scale of the problem is going to have a future in this. Yeah. It's not going to be monolithic.
Okay, and just very briefly, Bob, because I want to be crystal clear on this. We've talked about some of the investment required to get past the start line, if you like. But once you're up and running in those years' time, preferably before 2030, according to your timeline, give us a sense of the costs, because you can't open a newspaper without reading about rising energy prices, cost of gas, so on and so forth. But help us understand fusion in that context.
Yeah, so, you know, some of it is, it's still early to know exactly what it's going to cost. We got to actually figure out exactly how we want to build these machines, and that's why we build. So that's, you know, what we're doing out here in Boston is we are learning by doing, by actually building one and keeping all the receipts. So we know how to make the next one lower cost. Because we know that the lower the cost, the more access there'll be, the faster we'll be able to get scaled, the faster we'll help solve the problem. But it's got to be competitive. And when you think about competitive, it's not just cost. It's also, you know, the other attributes, like how socially acceptable. Can you actually get it built? When can you turn it on? When can you turn it off? How does it play with other technologies? How does it play in the politics? And so whenever you look at an energy crisis, you know, local or global, you often find the interplay among all those different attributes. And fusion provides a unique combination of those, in the sense that it doesn't have the legacy of nuclear power, it doesn't have the fuel inputs, it doesn't have the land use, and it doesn't have the intermittency. So that could be a really powerful combination. And then additionally, we think it could be very low cost.
Yeah, fantastic. We've just got a few minutes left, Bob. Here's Janan asking a question. Was it hard to get investor interest and support to build the net zero energy machine? Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes and no. So early on, it was very, very difficult to get this off the ground, but we were able to find people who really resonated with what we were trying to do. And then once we were, up and running and showing success, knocking out milestones, we really brought those partners along for the ride and published and tried to be as transparent as we could. And that was really paid off in the end by, and continues to pay off by increasing confidence that this will go from something that felt impossible to something that's going to happen. And so that really made this last funding round easier than maybe one would have thought.
Yeah, well, kudos to you if you're just tuning in. Commonwealth Fusion Systems just raising $1.8 billion in their latest funding round. So, Bob, what's your prediction then? Are we going to see the rise of fusion companies, or is the reality that today's huge energy companies will embrace fusion, maybe by acquiring or merging with companies like yours? What's going to happen?
Hard to say. I don't have a crystal ball on any of that. I think we're at the beginning of a technology, and those are always chaotic periods. We need to show the technology works. So, we've got to hit milestones. We've got to, proof will be in the pudding. And so we're excited in 2025 to have our system be coming online, and then thereafter, push a button and make a bunch of heat, more heat out than went in. And that'll be a big moment for the company. And at that point, I think it'll be a decision point broadly about what to do with this technology and how is this technology going to continue down the commercialization pathway.
Yeah, so Bob, thank you so much for being so open with your answers today. I guess my final question is really a bit more personal to you, as a leader. We talk a lot about energy, but I want to get more of a sense of what drives you.
Yeah, so I'm personally driven by doing things that are really hard. That the human experience has been the last 100 years really the highest lever thing is doing something that's very, very hard that is at the edge of what people are capable of doing, and moving that experience just a little bit further. And by lots of people doing that, constantly expanding the sort of sphere of human experience. And we picked a really hard problem in fusion, but there's a lot of other hard problems that we think, you can put a lot of really smart people behind, capital, and make a big difference in.
Fantastic. Well, Bob Mumgard, I hope you get a sense of our interest and support for what you're doing as part of this community. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Great to see you, Bob. Great to see you and great to be back. Thank you. That's Bob Mumgard, Chief Exec of Commonwealth Fusion Systems, CFS, and fascinating. And the sort of story that I know we're going to look back on and to say, goodness, can you believe that we crossed paths back in that day? So thank you. If you're just tuning in, this is the EnergyTech Annual, brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs, and lots still to come. Where are we? Well, let me just give you a quick glimpse. At 10 to 4, we've got a short coffee break, but even now I can see our next panel joining us. So let's talk barriers and some things that often our next guests won't necessarily see because they are so on a mission. I can see Sarah Merrick. Welcome, Sarah. Rotimi Alabi and Jennifer Craw. Welcome, one and all. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Good, yeah, really pleased to be here.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Now, Jennifer, you are very entrepreneurial, but I hope you won't mind me saying that we've got here two specimens, haven't we? Because we've got two super driven entrepreneurs, and I'm going to introduce you each in turn. Rotimi Alabi, RAB Microfluidics, you're making oil analysis dynamic. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Ollie, and thank you to the team for inviting me to partake in this program. So RAB Microfluidics is a technology company that helps diagnose early signs of failure in lubricated machinery and prevent engine failure using our patented microfluidic technology. Why does that really matter? In 2020, 2% of marine shipping vessels, which are responsible for almost 90% of world trade, developed engine failures, costing £500 million to actually fix. And this is just one industry. Similar problems occur in power generation, processing and manufacturing, other forms of transport, and it costs globally around £4.8 billion annually. So RAB Microfluidics is just looking to address this industry challenge by automating the condition monitoring process with our offering.
All right, so I get it. So you're sort of analysing the oil, predicting when something might go wrong. But it's cleverer than that, isn't it? Because you're actually going to the ship or the container. You don't have to ship it off to a lab, do you?
Absolutely. So we are turning the current process on its head. Currently, what companies do to identify failure in the machine is take a sample of oil from the machinery and send it up to a lab for analysis. So we have brought the laboratory to the machinery with our microfluidic technology and automate that process and do the analysis there and there and create real-time results.
Got it. And just very briefly, Rotimi, where are you? You launched, you've got customers. Where are you up to on the journey?
We actually launched the product in June this year. We have customers that have pre-ordered some of our products already. So that's exciting for us as a company. And we're looking to delivering the product to the customer.
Got it. No, thank you. That's Rotimi from RAB Microfluidics. Sarah Merrick. Sarah, I love your company, Ripple Energy. You're putting people in control. Tell us how you're doing it.
We are. So we are a clean energy ownership platform. And what we do is we enable individual households to own a tiny bit of a large-scale wind farm and then get the green, low-cost electricity that it generates supplied to their home via the grid. So, it's kind of a really low-cost alternative to putting solar panels on your roof. So instead of owning a whole solar array on your roof, you own a tiny bit of a large-scale wind farm up in Scotland or in Wales, and then you get the electricity supplied via the grid. So yeah, but for the first time ever, people can be part of the ownership mix of very large assets, because in energy, bigger projects are just so much cheaper than smaller scale projects.
Brilliant. And so just to be clear, this is real ownership. This isn't like me adopting a penguin at London Zoo. No,
exactly. So you, our members actually own the wind farm. So there's a co-op, and we manage the co-op. Ripple makes it all happen for them, but Ripple doesn't own the wind farm. The people. So for our first wind farm, it's been built. It's owned by just over 900 people. It's a single turbine in South Wales. It's been built. It's about to get connected to the grid. The 900 people, they actually own it. There's a company as well that owns a little bit of it as well. But yeah, it's genuine ownership. They genuinely own that wind farm for 25 years.
Love it. Hugely creative. Love it. So this is Ripple Energy. Jennifer Craw, you're leading Opportunity Northeast. You're in the business of supporting brilliant businesses. Just remind us about the core of the organisation.
We're private sector led. Our purpose is to grow and diversify the economy in the northeast of Scotland. And because we're the northeast of Scotland with Aberdeen City at the very heart, then energy transition and this whole focus on the climate emergency, the climate crisis, and actually what threat that brings and how we actually address that threat as an opportunity for developing new low carbon green businesses for the future. So I'm really struck by the opening comments today, which are about actually what's the opportunity here, because it's really, really difficult in an environment where you're a very oil and gas dependent region to not just look beyond what we need to do here and now to keep the lights on, and that's really important, but also to be driving growth and supporting entrepreneurs come up with solutions, working with the larger organisations to make sure there are real energy alternatives, and we are still using all the know-how, the skills, the expertise, both engineering and operations and design to bring those new ideas forward. So digitisation and what we've been doing through EnergyTech is really at the heart of that in terms of bringing that thinking, that process, that speed, that rapid approach, agile approach to solving these problems for the future. So we're not quite at fusion in the region, but who knows?
Yeah, watch this space. No, thank you. That's Jennifer Craw from Opportunity Northeast. Now, let's talk about barriers to entry in energy tech. And to start with, and Sarah, why don't you go first? Let's look back at the history of the company and be as pithy and provocative as you like. What stood in your way and what did you do about it?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest barriers we faced was, we were obviously a small startup doing something completely new that had never been done in the UK or pretty much anywhere in the world. And, we had to work with, developers of wind farms and big utilities we need access to the wind farms so they could open up a bit of the ownership for them. And then we also needed to partner with utilities so they could supply the electricity from the wind farm to our customers' homes. And one of the biggest problems is just getting traction with big companies is really, really difficult. So, the timescales on which big companies operate is a lot longer than startups. As a startup, you're used to, get your MVP ready, test it, launch it, test it, improve it, and then there's this constant cycle of just getting decisions done, just the pace of decisions and the pace of action is just completely different. So trying to then work with utilities, they don't have a concept of runway and needing to get things done really quickly because we need to sort of prove it, gain traction with investors, and sort of move on. I think that was the biggest problem, barrier that we faced, really.
Got it. So if you're tuned in or watching this on Catch Up from Utility, tell us what you think and how we could find a way through this. But by the way, Sarah, was your reflection, well, this is just how they are, or if you were giving them a really tough pep talk about how they could evolve how they work with startups, what would you say?
I think they totally recognise that they're they're a big utility and it takes them a long time to make decisions. So there's that awareness, but I think as was said earlier, that it's whether or not there's that awareness across the whole company. You might be speaking to one person in their sort of innovation or sort of new propositions team, but then once they think it's a great idea that they want to get involved with, it's then taking it to every other. They need to get sign off from every other different part of the company, and ultimately there are people that we've just right. We can't work with them because their timescales just don't match ours, and so we then go and work with utilities who've got timescales more aligned to us. So ultimately, right. If they can't act, then they just sort of miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get some thoughts. We'll get some thoughts from Rosa in a sec, but what you're saying is already resonating. Steve chimes in here. Sarah, couldn't agree more on the difficulties on getting big companies to commit something new and likely needing multiple of them together to agree. By the way, what's your pithy piece of advice to Steve, if you put it in a nutshell?
Just, you've got to work with people that work on the same time scale. It just... there's a combination. You've got to keep plugging away, but ultimately you have to choose the opportunities that you think have got a decent chance of working, and you have to be quite harsh in terms of moving away from ones that you just think actually it's not going to work in the timeframes that we need. We need to get things done. We need to get things done quickly. Yeah,
all right. So, Rosa, feel free to build on that, but also to change the subject. Biggest barrier you faced?
So, for me, two come to mind, really. One is in 2020, we almost ran out of money. And you can imagine that for a startup company, funding is almost everything. We almost fell casualty to the pandemic. And we almost, we're at a point where we only had essentially maybe around 4 weeks to actually exist as a company, and we were able to turn that around that year. So the access to funding is still a big issue for many startups, and navigating those waters are sometimes very, very tricky. And following on that, the other one is we are based in Aberdeen, so we're based in the Northeast, and this is a primarily oil and gas city. And you're competing for talent with companies that can pay significantly more. So you have to find clever ways to incentivize the right talent to actually join you. And those are some of the things that we have faced over the past few years.
Right. So, Rosa, let's dig into two of those things. What's a clever way to incentivize them?
In terms of incentivizing, you really just have to understand where the talent you're trying to pull into your company is coming from. And just understand what actually motivates them. So once you can drill into that, then you stand a chance to be able to say, right, we can offer you this, or we are very flexible to be able to do this. Another thing that the startup will have that a large corporate might not have is the fact that you can incentivize with share options. So that seems to also do the trick for some individuals.
All right. Well, I'm about to get Jennifer's reflections on all of this, but Rotimi, I won't let you off without asking, on the funding, was the issue that you didn't know where to find the cash, or that you knew very well where to find it, you just couldn't unlock it?
We knew where to find the cash. We were 48 hours from closing an investment round for £1.3 million. COVID hit, the investor pulled out, leaving us with a gap, really. And we had to start from scratch. We had to go back to our existing our creditors to basically say, right, we need some time here to be able to recover from this. And then we went out with the proposition again, because we knew we had a well-placed proposition for investment. So we had to just do that process again. And
so where did you get the money?
We got the money in Scotland. We got the money from angel investors. So initially, we were targeting corporate VCs, and like Sarah was saying earlier on, they moved slowly. So we thought we would do the round in around 4 to 6 months. It took us 9 months to get to the point where they pulled out. So they just moved slowly, and that is an issue.
I get it. So Jennifer, how is all this resonating?
I think there's two key elements, and one is pace and one is customers. And I think pace and demand for funding in those early stages, particularly when you move into proper startup rather than just development concept, and you're starting to need real cash to pay for things. I think generally more cash is required than most companies believe. Now, that's back to, at many stages, founders are dealing with the impossible. So if you said, I need $1 million, or you thought I need $1 million, but actually you think you can only raise $500,000, of course you'll go for $500,000, but you very, very quickly then get on to the next $500,000. So I think there's a real challenge in those early, real startup 12 months in terms of available cash to pay for your early development costs before you've really proven your concept in a commercial environment. And that leads me to customers, and I'm really taken by Sarah's comment about choose your customers. And I do think that's one of the things I hear back from the EnergyTech participants, which is they do much better understand the pace and the approach of startups. They've got a lot to learn, but equally they've got a lot to learn in terms of how they need to respond. So if you're a major corporate and you've got a venture arm, is it an entrepreneurial venture arm that's prepared to take risk with these startups? So I think choose your customers and I know that just will be a luxury many startups don't have, but heed that advice, because whether it's the right investor, angel or VC, or the right customer, you all have to agree the timelines you're working to and the criticality of the decision making. And if the decision's no, and I used to work in Scottish Enterprise, and our key rule was, if our answer is no, make it a quick no, because a slow no, either from a customer or a funder, is a real death knell in the early stages of a business startup.
Yeah, you've got Sarah and Rotimi nodding along to that. And by the way, Jennifer, if I'm tuned in thinking, hang on, Opportunity Northeast, I wonder if you can help me. Where do organisations have to be based? You clearly have a Scottish accent. You've talked about Aberdeen, but of course we're drawn to think about Northeast with other geographies in mind. Just remind us.
So our specific geography is Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, but through our partnership with both Codebase and Barclays, clearly this program EnergyTech is broader than that. So I think the key thing is what we're looking for to make these programs work is we get the right, most interested people around it's been around the screen actually this year, but involved. So where we've got companies that will benefit that are in our region, that's what we want to see happen, and that's what we bring to the programme. But equally, we've got to look outwards as a region to learn both internationally and across the UK to compete.
Yeah, got it. Now, Sarah, I want to get us sort of looking at the biggest barriers you now face, but I'd be remiss not to ask you to reflect on the financial journey that you've been on. Some of that resonate, barriers, or have you just smashed through all the doors?
No, absolutely. So for us, we're primarily a crowdfunded company. So we've done 4 different rounds on Seeders, and that in terms of timing, that is pretty quick. There's a lot of work involved in terms of getting your campaigns ready. But yeah, and as a female founder, finding out that only 1% of VC money goes to female-led startups, it is quite gutting. So we've just been really, really fortunate in terms of the reception that we've had on Seeders, and without that access to that investment, we literally just wouldn't be here as a company. So we feel incredibly fortunate we've now got more than 2,000 individual investors in Ripple as a company, and you do need to have these alternative options, because you can't necessarily it is difficult to get VC funding. So having alternatives like Seeders is really, really important for so many startups.
Yeah, a question coming in on that about the mechanism. What mechanism, Sarah, is Ripple using to share/manage ownership of the wind farm? That's a question from Steve.
So it's a bona fide cooperative. So we basically manage the cooperative, and then people buy shares in the co-op, and the co-op owns the wind farm or part of the wind farm, and then that's combined with power purchase agreements with each of our supply partners as well. So but the ownership entity is a cooperative, and that's what people buy shares in.
Got it. Now, on your previous point, Sarah, I think you're an exceptional entrepreneur. We spent a week on a mission together in San Francisco. What do you say to the viewer that says, Sarah, your being a female founder is something that makes you stand out over and above your peers? Has that ever been an advantage, or is that a slightly crass analysis?
No, I think the big one bit of advice I've had as a female founder is to be more like a man, and and that is really quite shocking. So I don't, I think it makes us really distinct as a company, and it's fantastic, and our investors, they know that they have. That they are quite sort of unique in terms of supporting a female-led startup, but it doesn't feel like a sort of it's. I think it does make it harder, but it does make us very, very unique, and it does make us stand out, because there just aren't that many, particularly in the tech space. There aren't many female-led companies at all.
No, noted. Rotary, what about today? What's the biggest challenge you face? And be as blunt as you like, and we might have some support tuned in.
So I will categorize that into 3 broad categories, really, and that will be around the conservative nature of UK investors. They more or less drip feed you the investment. So to the point where it really stifles growth. If you're comparing to Silicon Valley investment, they expect you to actually detail exactly what you need to actually get the job done and fail fast if you're failing. But in the UK, you get drip fed the investment, and you're just crawling, really, and it just takes you a long time to get to the end point.
All right. So in that case, why don't you raise money from Silicon Valley?
It's a complete dynamic, really, that you have to be prepared for. And Lab Microflix as a company is planning to raise investment from the US in our next round. So we think we will be going to the US to actually change the dynamic and really scale up our offering as rapidly as possible. So we will go there, but you have to be ready to go there.
Right. I haven't forgotten your other 2 points are still to come. But briefly, Jennifer, getting a bit of flack here for our peers. We both know some very dynamic UK-based investors. What do you say?
Well, I mean, interesting in terms of some of the feedback from the incumbents on EnergyTech about understanding the pace, and maybe some of the more traditional VCs are used to more traditional business models. So the question is there more to be done with that investment community to understand the playbooks differently? Not that I would be, an expert in telling VCs how to go about and do their business, but actually, are we targeting all key parts of the system that are going to drive growth in tech? Yeah. And I think that's a good point. I think, being able to identify new and different approach from entrepreneurs in terms of that diversity, but equally in terms of understanding the pace and the pace of development and the pace of what you have to do to change to get your product or your service to market in a tech environment. And are they set up to do that? Or do you need to go to a very, very specialist VC who does that, in which case you're very targeted? So it's back to choose your investor, choose your customer, if you have that luxury.
Yeah, and it is a great thing about the EnergyTech program, Barclays as a connector, a convener. Rotimi, what were 2 and 3 on your list of next barriers?
So 2 and 3 will be navigating and selling up within a large corporate. So just building on Sarah's point, really. When you want to sell to a large corporate, you identify someone that's receptive to what it is you're offering. And once you get that and you have tested it, then the next step of that, and this is what we're observing right now, is actually scaling that within the corporate itself to say, right, we need to roll this out on a larger scale. And then you just meet a barrier that you really have to navigate. And that's a different learning curve in its own. So that is what we're experiencing now. And the final one is really, we are in the Northeast competing for talent with oil and gas majors is really a big deal. So we have to be clever in the ways we incentivize talent, really, to join RAB Microfluidics as a company.
No, love it. And I'm sure you relate to that same point, Sarah. What barriers do you see ahead?
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it is about scale. So, as a startup, you start small and then you build up gradually, albeit, as quickly as possible. Whereas in energy, scale is the cheapest projects are just huge. So for us, it's about, how do we go from, one turbine project to a, multi-turbine project in a sort of manageable way. So it's, and then ultimately, how do we get into, gigawatt scale offshore wind farms that can supply a million households? So it's about, where is that sort of, where are the stepping stones from something very small and manageable as a pilot project to something a lot bigger? And it's bridging the gap between small projects to very large ones, which is the biggest challenge I think we face going forward. But I mean, ultimately, it's about then getting a small percentage of a big project rather than clearly not doing a whole massive offshore wind farm ourselves. So yeah, but it's that it's those stepping stones to scale in a sector which is all about really, really massive scale is the biggest challenge I think so far.
Yeah, so here's a question for all of you. I mean, I'm lucky enough to meet brilliant leaders across health tech and education and energy tech as well. And a lot of the objections or barriers that you've talked about would come up in all of those conversations too, about talent, about access to capital, about navigating large corporates. So I guess, Jennifer, my question to you first is there something special or unique, or what is special and unique about energy tech that leads to particular barriers?
I think it's such a transformation, I'll be really honest, in terms of it. Oil and gas energy has been quite a traditional industrial, very, leading edge in terms of innovation, technology and engineering, but not in business models or entrepreneurial leadership. So we have our best collection of large corporates, I would say, in energy across the whole of the UK. And actually what we need now is disruptors. And it's not an industry that actually has had much experience of disruption or much experience of doing things at a pace, because it's safety has always been number one, rightly so. So I think it's quite a challenge to this sector. How do you balance all those competing forces? But actually, I don't think there's I think this is the best time to do it. I think the climate emergency has driven a strategic change. We've seen that in Scotland, certainly in the Scotland licensing round, which is great, a great transformation in terms of moving forward. So I think it's about how does this industry fast-paced respond to that transformation and embrace across large corporates, small ventures and small startups and find a new model to work together and make the best of all of them.
Right, that is exactly the challenge. As I hear it, I see a future for you in the diplomatic service, Jennifer, after that answer. If you were being very blunt, what really needs to change, at the risk of ruffling a few feathers?
Action, faster action, and taking risk, some financial risk. Now, they can afford to do that. Not any risk operationally, not any risk that has any impact on people's lives. But take some risk and act faster, and they've got funds to do it.
Yeah, that sounds to me, Sarah, like a call to some of the incumbents to put their money where their mouths are. What would you say is different about EnergyTech? What do you reckon?
I think EnergyTech, because I think it's this massive opportunity. Everything's changing. Everyone knows in the sector. Everyone knows everything's changing, and and being a startup in a sector where everything's changing, you haven't got the sort of burden of legacy. We don't need to protect what was done 50 years ago or 30 years ago because we weren't around. We've got the privilege to just be able to just be looking forward and creating solutions that work in that future, whereas so many of the incumbents have got, they've got one eye on the future, but they've got to sort of protect all their legacy assets as well, and it's a really difficult thing for them to do. So I think it's just it's a brilliant opportunity in place for startups to be working, because there is, there's recognition that everything has to change. There's recognition that, startups have got sort of new ideas that everyone needs to innovate. So I think my advice to big incumbents would just be to embrace that change and get involved in an active way rather than a sort of passive. We want to be innovative but not actually be innovative.
I get it. So Rosa, and you've clearly both been very good at getting over these barriers, but what other changes would you call for to just unlock much more collaboration between the big and the small? What would you change? If you come off mute, that's a £5 fine to our charity of choice.
My apologies for that. So previously, I would have thought that it will be the issue was around trying to a mindset change. But right now, because of what we're seeing in energy transition, everybody's moving from traditional industries to more forward-looking industries that focus on sustainability and the environment. There is that mindset change. But there's that inertia where there's no action. So people are getting amenable to the idea that things have to change, but the action is not yet being taken. And what we will need to actually move to the next step is that action to be taken. You have to be able to embrace new technology. You have to be able to embrace new business model, and you have to actually consciously act to do all of these things, not just say the words. Because if you say the words, then nothing happens. But if you act, then you can actually bring all of this to reality.
All right. So we've got more questions coming in. I'm going to get to those. But Rosa, what about you? Quite rightly, you put calls out for others to change. How do you need to change to thrive in the next couple of years?
We have to maintain the ethos of startups. Really, is being very, very flexible and adaptable. You just have to be able to adapt to the situation you find yourself, and that is one thing that startups have for them that actually makes us actually take significant risk and are able to achieve the impossible, if you may say. So you have to continue in that trend. You should be able to identify what the problem is and find a way through the problem. It's either you go over it, across it, or through it.
Yeah. I always like an entrepreneur who answers a question, how do you need to change, by saying, the trick is not to change. I think that is that's definitely a glass half full mentality. We know exactly what you mean, by the way. Sarah, here's a specific question that's just come in from you, from Ollie. Good name. What are the panel's tips for successful crowdfunding, if they have any? Yeah,
I'd say be really clear in what your big mission is, what the big picture is, not just with your, this specific individual funding round, but where do you want to get to, and be really honest, open and transparent with, answer every single question really openly, really honestly, and really transparently. And people recognize that. And certainly we got fantastic feedback from people because, our first round was very early, and the fact that we were so open and so honest in our response really, really helped.
And thank you, Sarah. And yours was equity crowdfunding.
Yes, yeah. We did
one Seeders platform.
We've done four rounds on Seeders. Yes, yeah.
Roughly how much?
Just over 2.5 million in total.
Yeah, I mean that must be quite. That's certainly up there with some of the bigger rounds and deals, right?
Yeah. We've been and it's been it's been on the platform rather than having it from VCs and then a little bit topped up on the platform. It's been genuine crowdfunding.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Thank you. Now, Jennifer, here's a question. Given the benefit to a local area and to the large companies themselves, do you think that large companies should have public commitments on the amount of spending or agreements that will be with SME, small and medium-sized enterprises, perhaps help balance the individual nervousness to picking something new and the tension to, quote, choose IBM? Thanks, Steve. That's a good one. Lots of thoughts around potential procurement targets and so on. What do you reckon?
So I wouldn't advocate a controlled system because I don't think that would work for entrepreneurs, and I don't think it would work for the customers overall. I think it's about understanding value and where innovation and value can emanate, and creating open channels to have those conversations and be recognised as a valuable source of both innovation, new ways of working, and new opportunities. So I understand why the question. I think what's really important, for example, we spoke about Scotland and offshore wind. It's really important that we do make sure that supply chains benefit from these new opportunities in terms of renewable energies as we move forward across the whole of the UK. So I'm not trying to be diplomatic, Ollie, I promise you, in terms of, I think mandating, no, but seeing the value, keeping live discussions about the value of SME, technology, innovation, supporting new ventures is really, really important. And maybe that's what we all need to take away to do more of, and how do we do that collectively? And I think that's a good question for EnergyTech and the participants this time round, and for the next EnergyTech number 2.
Yeah. No, that was a brilliant answer, and I totally agree about joining those different forces. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Sarah, very, very quick question. Would Ripple consider investing in energy storage projects, or will they be focused only on generation? So
Ripple itself doesn't invest in anything because we don't own them. It's more about combining storage with wind and solar projects, and it's certainly it's definitely on our radar. Yes.
Okay, watch this space. Rosa, final question, and I'll ask Sarah this as well. Jennifer, I'm sure would endorse the question. Just the dream person you'd love to speak to right now to drive your success. Rosa, who's top of the list?
That's a very good question. I think it'll be someone that can actually make an impact within the energy space in terms of driving or executing on what has been discussed in this panel session. Someone that can actually move the dial. So the likes of the decision makers within companies that can actually say, right, we want to take a bet on this technology. We want to take a bet on startups, and then see that actually come into fruition.
Okay.
So not that I don't want to give you a name, but it is almost a broad class of people that can actually execute on what has been said.
Noted. So in terms of oil analysis, have a look, and hopefully we can get you some useful things. Sarah, what's your answer to that?
I'll give you a name if you want. Somebody like, we want to be able to have, you buy an EV and you know, just like you can get leather seats or alloy wheels, you get a wind farm to power it as well. So talking to somebody like Elon Musk about, can you get your Tesla and then have a, you know, add on, tick your box? Oh yeah, you buy a bit of a wind farm to power it for the next 25 years. That'd be quite nice, I think.
Love it. Well, Elon, if you're watching, then Sarah's email will be sent through after the show. So thank you very much. But on a serious note, Jennifer, Sarah, and let me get it absolutely right. Rotimi, thank you so much for joining me. Really good food for thought there. Thank you all very much indeed, and see you very soon. Thank you. Well, and thank you as well to everyone who sent through questions on that particular panel session. I can see Martin from Codebase helping me filter lots of different questions coming through. Right. I'd love to know what you've made of the conversation so far. What haven't we discussed? And what are your reflections so far? Keep your comments coming. Now, we're going to move on at pace to the world of the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. Now, don't worry, I'm not talking about our next guests. I'm talking about robotics and why we would use a robot in the first place. So to help us understand the cutting edge and the art of what's possible, why don't we welcome up our next guests, and I'll introduce them to you. Very much looking forward to seeing them. Lee, Eva, and Ravindra, welcome to EnergyTech Annual. Very good to see everybody. Been looking forward to this one, I must say. Let me introduce you each in turn. This is Lee Wilson of HonuWorks, Eva Magnisali of Dataform Lab, and Ravindra Chunilal of Sellafield. Greetings to all of you. Lee, let's start with you. HonuWorks, you're taking us under the sea surface.
Is that a £5 fine, Ollie?
It is. Save the Children will be grateful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so HonuWorks, we're an Aberdeen-based startup, and we're developing new models for operating robots subsea, something that's been done for 20 to 30 years offshore. Maybe not a lot of people know about it, but the models, they're in need of a change. Like we talked about business model in the last discussion. To really scale that further, we need to change how we deploy and operate these vehicles.
Now, so I think we're looking at a slide of that right now. I can see what looks like a submarine, but I could also see something on the end of an umbilical cord off the side. So what am I looking at here on the slides tab?
So what you're looking at, the robot that's on the end of the tether, if you like, is a conventional subsea, what we call a work-class ROV, remotely operated vehicle. Now, typically, that would be deployed from a vessel on the surface, offshore in the field, with lots of people on board, and that vessel would be diesel powered. It would be emitting quite a lot of carbon and costing quite a lot of money to have there. We deploy these robots to inspect infrastructure, to inspect assets, to maintain or repair assets. And that is increasingly important because we're going to need to work at sea and subsea a lot more in the future. So oil and gas has been working offshore for, as I said, 30, 40 years. Now we have offshore wind in emerging blue economy sectors who will need to work subsea with an economic footprint and an economic model and sustainable and scalable way. So what we've devised is a solution to the problem of the cost and carbon footprint of these vessels, what we call as a submersible mothership, no emissions. It's fully electric. It is commissioned and sent off from the harbour. It transits to the work site completely under the sea. It deploys the subsea robot to do the work that the conventional vehicle would have done. It's controlled and supervised from the beach. And when it's done, it pops back in and transits back to the harbour and awaits its next instruction.
Fascinating. Goodness me. Thank you, Lee. So, and just remind us, so who is your client in that instance then? Is that governments, private companies?
Well, it depends. There's a range of different value chains that apply with this type of model, but typically it will be those companies that are looking to maintain and inspect subsea assets. So the asset owners might be the offshore wind operators or the offshore oil companies. They'll typically have a service company that contract this type of equipment to then do the oil.
And just to be crystal clear, we're going to meet the team in a second, but just to be crystal clear, what that particular robot is doing in the image that you've painted for us or shown us is inspection to check for damage, for disrepair, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. So as part of an ongoing commitment, when you put something on the seabed, you have to inspect it regularly. It's a very harsh environment. It's an extreme environment. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of corrosion. So you have to check for degradation to your assets and potentially damage from external factors like fishing.
Yeah.
Like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Thank you for bringing that to life. Eva, let's have a chat with you. Dataform Lab, you're working with the notoriously glamorous construction industry. Tell us a bit more.
Hi, Ollie. Yes, that's true. Dataform Lab is a startup within the construction industry. And what we're trying to do is to accelerate the introduction and the integration of automation, mainly in offsite construction. So we are trying to tackle this problem from multiple points of view. First, by creating digital workflows that can enable all stakeholders to access and use automation, either robotic programming or robotic manufacturing. And we remove all the complexity that is embedded in all this process of robotic programming. But we also work at the business level, providing automation consultancy so that the integration of advanced fabrication technologies is not just another technology trend, but it's led by business decisions. And it can actually help bring automation in construction through a very structured business model.
Yeah. So in very simple terms, Eva, you're helping construction companies understand robotics and automation in context. Are you actually helping them build the robots too, or is that done by someone else and you're just putting out a plan?
So the robotic equipment, most of it already exists. You can see an example just behind me. It's industrial robotic arms that have been used and revolutionized manufacturing for many years now. It's not new technology in that sense. The innovation is at the part where we connect design to manufacturing. So we are streamlining design and translating it into robotic code for the machine.
Got it. That looks terrifying behind you. It looks like it's going into your ear. What is that? What is that?
It's an industrial robotic arm. It's a very flexible machine, actually. It's just a robotic arm that whatever you put at the end of it as a tool, that's the process that it performs. And that's another benefit of using this kind of machinery, that it's quite flexible, so you can customize the process of manufacturing very easily.
Yeah. There you go. It's just a regular robotic arm. There you go. I don't know. I've not got one in my background. Now, how about Rav from Sellafield? Thank you so much for joining us. Just remind me, Sellafield, Rav, Europe's largest nuclear site, but actually what you're doing now is a very different type of operation.
Hi, Ollie. Yes, so we're now transitioning from what was, mainstream operations into a different type of operation. We're transitioning into decommissioning, nuclear decommissioning, and yes, it's a huge sort of program that we've got. Those who have sort of looked at what Sellafield does online will see this quite clearly. It's 100 years plus. Currently, as it's set out, and we've recognised that robotics, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems got a huge role to play in delivering that mission going forward for us. It's new, it's challenging. We've got challenges that no one else has ever sort of tackled before globally, and that's also due to the nature of some of the facilities that we've got as well. So when you talked about dark, dirty, dangerous environments, absolutely, those are what we've got on our sites that we want to get into in the safest possible way, and protect our workforce at the same time. So ultimately, it's about how we can deliver that nuclear decommissioning mission at pace, improve safety, a better environmental impact. We're using these sort of systems. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, you talk about dark and dirty and dangerous, but you seem to have added another D. It looks a bit like a dog that I can see in an image. I hope our audience can see that tuning in. What are we looking at?
So that's a almost standard off the shelf. It's made by Boston Dynamics. It's called Spot. They've given it a name, Spot, the robotic dog. And what we've got there, image of what we've recently trialed on the site, which is to send this quadruped into an environment, a radioactive environment, to do a bit of a scan of what is that environment like, where are the sort of challenges for us, are there any sort of like unknowns that we need to be aware of before we go in there and start decommissioning. But what it has done is protected our workforce by not going into that challenging environment, it doing the work for us. It's a great bit of kit. We've been working collaboratively with our supply chain and other partners to develop this, and what you might see on it is what we've made some PPE for it as well, a protective gear, so that when it does come out of a radioactive environment, it's very easily decontaminated, and it can be moved yet into another environment, so it can be reused.
Fascinating. Protective pet equipment. Right. Thank you, Rob. What a fascinating job you've all got. Let's bring you all back together, because before we dig into the cutting edge of what's possible, Lee, do you think there are any misconceptions when people start to talk about robotics?
I think there are a few. First of all, the most popular misconception is they all look like the Terminator or Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1990s. As we've seen there, they look vastly different. Whether they're industrial robots, whether they're robot dogs, or they're swimming robots under the sea. I think that's one of the most common.
Yeah, interesting. Eva, forgive me. No, carry on, Lee.
No, that's it. I think that was the main one. People, when I present the swimming vehicle, they wouldn't even think it's a robot. It's something. Right. A submarine. There's people inside, and that's one of the common questions we've got: is where does the driver sit?
Right, that's interesting. So Eva, I mean, my question about misconception is not as light-hearted as it seems, because actually education has to be part of your mission.
Yes, that's true. It's a really important part of our mission to demystify what robotics means for construction. Especially because, as Lee mentioned, there are many different robots. People think of androids just moving plasterboards on a construction site when they think of industrial robotics. But there is also a big misconception within the construction industry about when to introduce automation. So I totally disagree with bringing automation just at the very end, just to solve a problem, just like to have a robot laying bricks. It has to be embedded in the design thinking since the very beginning of a project.
And presumably, we hear a lot about the idea of a sort of just transition, bringing in automation, because, of course, what might be at stake is, humans and jobs.
Well, it actually, the introduction of automation creates different kinds of jobs. It's removing some jobs that are very dangerous, like welding or working on a height. But there are very many misconceptions. Everybody, when they hear robotics and automation, they think that everybody's losing their jobs. That's true.
No, absolutely. We've got to break down some of those misconceptions, if that's what they are. Rav, we've got so much that I want to get through. We've got some questions that I'm inviting from our audience. Help me understand the intersection of robotics and artificial intelligence, because your role spans the two.
Yeah, so robots, just a bit of metal equipment, and to work in a way which is going to be value add. That's where the software then sort of sits behind it. With what is the task that needs to be undertaken. Almost teach it, and then let and then at a certain point you then allow the computer to understand using the software and the algorithms about how that can be automated, to start doing those sort of repetitive tasks, understanding what the environment is, what is possible, what isn't possible, and then also taking it that step further and working with other technologies and sensors that are out there and merging them together so you've got a better understanding of the wider environment so it can work as a full system. And I think that is one of the greatest challenges that I think not just ourselves but the industry is sort of faces in terms of how do you start linking this together, how do you start creating some of these standards as well, so you can have more plug and play systems so everything starts working and talking to each other.
And what's an example, Rav, of how AI is already deployed in some of what you're doing in Sellafield?
So we're using AI, not as much as we'd like to, in all honesty. But what we have started to do is embrace it in some of our UAVs. So the UAVs do inspections at height, not something which would have been done typically using, scaffolders to put that up. But what it has done is improve the rate at which we can get that onto our sites. It can do inspections today, can do inspection, in a week or a month down the line, and then into the future. And what the AI will allow us to do is understand, what changes have happened, where are defects that we struggle to sort of pick up, and then help improve, make a decision on the back of that.
Yeah, and just remind us, Rav, UAVs in that context. What's that standing for? So basically drones. Yeah. And what about, you must have heard this a million times, Rav, but security. When I see Spot the dog roaming around a nuclear decommissioning site, susceptibility to being hacked, having a new owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety, security, absolutely top of our agenda when it comes to these sort of like wireless technologies and devices. So we work with we work with our security teams that we've got on our sites. We also work with our regulators as well, and others in the supply chain who are helping continuously develop and evolve something which is continuously moving. So it's just keeping it as safe as possible. But one of the key elements for us is that we've got a fail-safe option when it comes to any of these sort of technologies, such that in the event something was to happen, it would we can then take back control, or it would fail in a safe manner.
Yes, I see. Can take back control. I can hear our politicians coming down in their busy vests as I speak. Right, got some questions coming in. I'm going to put those to you. Eva, here's one for you from Philip. Thank you, Philip, who I see as a retired physics teacher, as it happens. What involvement does Eva have in 3D printing within the construction industry, especially where houses are now being printed in 5 to 7 days? Is that really happening?
So that's true. 3D printing is a big topic at the moment, concrete 3D printing and large-scale 3D printing. We have worked with different companies, both to investigate the available technologies, but again, our job at Dataform Lab is not to reinvent the wheel. We work mostly with architectural practices and designers to make sure that we form and they form a very solid business plan. So what we see a lot in construction is that there are R&D projects that they are a one-off. So one pavilion is being constructed, one sample of a building, and then everything dissolves, because construction is so fragmented that this knowledge is very easily lost from one project to the next. So we have been working with several practices to make sure that 3D printing in construction can become an actual business model that will bring revenue to this company.
Yes. No, got it. Because Lee, you've had to do this, haven't you? I mean, to get where you've had to raise funding, you've had to deal with some massive corporations. How have you done that?
This is, we're in a conservative industry, there's no doubt about that. I think one of the benefits we've had is that we have been using this robotic technology for a long time because it was an enabling technology. So in the 70s and early 80s, a lot of field developments were done by human divers, a lot of the sort of installation work or the maintenance work. But as we discovered reserves in deeper water, we were in depths where humans simply couldn't go. We needed another tool. So we have history of being able to deploy robots in the sector and use them. The problem has been we got into then a very stable business model using the vessels, using the big crews offshore, and that's no longer sustainable. So the challenge we have now is not necessarily disrupting the technology. A lot of it is there, it's available to us. It's about disrupting the business model and maybe addressing, not maybe, but definitely addressing some of the concerns Rav highlighted around security. You know, it's not just about a nefarious actor getting control of your vehicle. It's about it doing something unexpected. It's about it not getting the result or acquiring the data you asked it to do. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Rav to sort of gaze into sort of what could become possible. But Lee, while I've got you, there's quite a bit that you could argue stands against you and Ever, because you're relatively small companies, relatively early stage. You haven't got access to the millions and billions that some of the larger firms have. Except I think you're going to see that you have certain advantages. What are they?
I think the first one is that we don't have an incumbent business to protect. One of the challenges I've seen in our industry has been, you know, and I'm talking from experience and some lessons learned, was it was difficult for some of the bigger or more incumbent players to disrupt their own businesses, even if they had the means to do so and the technology to do so. So I think we have that as an advantage. But as you say, we do have the challenge that we maybe don't have access to existing contracts through which to deploy or evaluate technology. We need partnerships.
Yeah, no, got it. I can see Ever nodding with a steely gleam in her eye. Ever, what's your secret weapon?
Yes, it's similar to what Lee said. Bigger companies have like very established business models that they work on in construction, so they are not as flexible to innovation and change, whereas a startup like Dataform Lab has more agility. But yes, I believe that the key in this case is interdisciplinary collaboration as an advantage, because creating partnerships within this industry is really crucial.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you've said that, because Rav, you sit in a particular physical location, Sellafield. What opportunities do you see if we sort of zoom right out across the piece for the future of robotics? Help me to draw some of these threads together.
So I think there's several that have been mentioned, already. So one is around, creating opportunities, for SMEs to, small SMEs, who are agile to be able to get involved and take some of their ideas, from concept through to completion as well. And we've got to create the environment to allow that to happen, across the piece. So when I look at Sellafield, it's a big site. If I zoom out further across the UK, there's several nuclear sites across the UK which face, similar sort of challenges. So how we draw the thread together to allow SMEs to develop and function not just on our site, but also on the other nuclear sites across the UK, but then also with the opportunity to then sell some of those services globally. I think.
So Rav, how have you got your head round interacting with the, punchy startup? Are you investing in them? Are you incubating what does that interface look like?
Yeah, really, really, really good question there, Ollie. So I'd say we're really at the start of that journey, recognizing that collaboration is the key, to sort of making this happen. We want to be transparent about the challenges that we've got, on our site, and then share that with, the academics and the supply chain, to be able to engage, but also taking learning from other sectors at the same time. So something that we're kicking off right now, so is very close to the Eagle Labs in Whitehaven, is a facility called RACO 1. So RACO stands for Robotics and AI Collaboration. And what we're doing there is taking a series of projects, that's going to support the nuclear decommissioning challenge that we're working on with academics and the supply chain all under one roof, to be able to share that understanding, share that learning, and look at how we take that forward. We can then help accelerate the delivery of, getting robotics, onto our sites. We can get the processes right, get the right people involved at all stages, including our regulators. It's absolutely key.
Yeah, brilliant. Ray caught one. I can see Robert Downey Jr.'s phone ringing as you say those words. That sounds epic. Here's a question for you, Lee. Do you foresee the uptake of autonomous underwater vehicles instead of inspection, repair and maintenance vessels being a smooth, easy transition, or do you expect a lot of pushback from the operators who refuse to adopt such technology? So just to say again, the uptake, so we're moving from autonomous underwater vehicles to inspection, repair and maintenance. First of all, Lee, what's the question you're talking about?
So he's asking about the barriers to adoption of these autonomous underwater vehicles, the robotic vehicles themselves. What are the barriers to the scale uptake in those systems versus the conventional historical vessel with lots of people on board and big heavy diesel engines? I think I do not expect an easy transition because we have been trying as an industry to move in this direction probably for a decade or so now, and there have been some great efforts at that. The trouble we've always had is the new generation of robots have still had an element of dependency on a vessel. We still needed a vessel to launch them and supervise them because we didn't quite trust them, and then update them with their position and then catch them at the end. So you still had this vessel in the field, and it eroded the value proposition, and it lessened the incentive to make that big leap, that switch. You said, well, if I've got a vessel there, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it, and that's safer and that's less risky. So I think that has been the challenge, but I see those barriers coming down now because there's technology there that can push these vehicles into the field without the conventional vessel. And when the first service company or when the first operator does that, everyone will have to catch up.
Okay, so I've got just a couple of final questions. We've just a few minutes remaining. Eva, somebody tuned in thinking we are within a very large construction company. We cannot afford to miss the potential of robotics. Give us, apart from calling your company today, give us a really blunt piece of advice to keep us up to speed.
I think changing the mentality of working on a day-to-day basis is really important. We need digital innovation in every aspect of construction. And as I said before, it's not just about thinking of robotics as a solution to a single manufacturing problem. It's about optimizing design for manufacturing, thinking about automation since the very beginning. So having an overall mentality shift is really important. And then the integration of the technology can follow once the business plan is put in place.
Yeah. So, Rav, listening to our entrepreneurs, how do you think this is going to play out? Because Lee is doing robotics underwater. Eva is doing robotics in construction and many other things. Are we going to see these verticals continue, or do you sense a sort of cross-sector opportunity here?
Both, I think. I think Lee mentioned, right at the start, robotics has been used, since from the 1970s going forward, and we already have robotics, on our site, and we see it as a growing field. Other sectors have embraced it, and it's a huge opportunity, to start collaborating with other sectors, cross-sector collaboration, to take, what might be a challenge in one environment could be very similar, in another environment. It just needs recognizing it requires us pulling those together, when you look at it from a national perspective, UK government's already recognised as part of its innovation strategy that robotics, autonomous systems, and AI, one of just a handful are going to be the growing sectors in the future, for us nationally. So, yes.
No, thank you, Rav. So, and just very briefly, final comment from each of you, Lee and Eva, a glimpse about the future of your companies. Lee, I shouldn't say you're going to stay underwater. That sounds like an insult, but you know what I mean.
We're definitely going to focus on underwater. The future for our company is we've built the established way to deploy these vehicles, and it makes sense to do it no other way the future.
Got it. Eva, how about you? A future beyond construction?
I believe we want to play a really important role in bridging designers and manufacturers, creating the workflows that will create a common language between the two.
Interesting. Watch this space.
Automation.
No, thank you, Eva and Lee. And Rav, I was only sorry not to see Spot the dog appearing in the background of your shot, but maybe next time, send him my best. For now, Rav, Lee and Eva, thank you very much for joining me. Future of robotics. I love those photos as well. Thank you for those questions, and thank you for everyone for tuning in so far. It's time to pop the kettle on. Because momentarily we're going to be having a coffee break. But to lead us in to that coffee break, to help some of those ideas percolate, I'm very pleased to welcome someone from a company we're a big fan of here at EnergyTech. That's Packed Coffee. And I'm very happy to welcome back George Bradley. Good afternoon, George.
Hi, Ollie. How are we doing?
I'm very well indeed. I can't see you yet, George. Oh, there you are. It's lovely to see you. How have you been?
Amazing. Very good. Thank you. It's lovely to be back. I just stepped into this event in the middle of automated underwater vehicles. I don't quite know what's going on, but it sounds very cool to me. So yeah, happy to be part of it.
No, don't worry. Well, my critics would talk about me being out of my depth, but I wouldn't say that myself, of course. Well, I don't think you'll be replaced by a robot anytime soon, George. So tell us a bit about coffee and tell us how we can enjoy a break to think about what's happened so far.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone's having a fantastic afternoon so far, and thanks for having me. My name's George Bradley. I'm the regional sales manager here at Packed Coffee. So I look after all sales and account management for our out-of-home activity, be that office and corporate workplace coffee, but also hospitality. So cafes, coffee shops, hotels, restaurants, you name it, out of home, we look after it. So for businesses who are looking to serve higher quality coffee, demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and a fairer than fair trade attitude to serving coffee, that's where we come in. So yeah, I'll get cracking, I guess. For everybody who opted in, they should have received 2 bags of packed coffee and some other information who look a little bit like this. So you can now follow along with the demo. If you didn't opt in, but you would like some coffee, don't worry, you'll receive a post-event email in the next few days with a link to the replay. If you would like to receive the coffee, please respond to the email, provide your address, and we'll send out some goodies to you and we'll do the rest. So that's the housekeeping managed. So what you're going to need right now is one of your coffees. Take your pick. Today we have the Brazilian Planalto. It's a very kind of chocolatey, classic coffee. And we also have Santa Rosa from Colombia, which is slightly lighter and fruitier. You're also going to need a cafetiere, which is what we're focusing on, a spoon and a mug. You're probably familiar with a number of different brew methods, such as the mocha pot, the stovetop. Mine is Ferrari Red. Or maybe something like the AeroPress or the V60, affectionately known as the funnel thingy. But yeah, today we're focusing on the humble cafetiere. I'm sure you've got one of these somewhere in a cupboard. It's the world's most popular way to make coffee. Very simple, very forgiving. And I'm sure you've done it before, but I just wanted to give you some expert tips to help you get the very best out of your brew. So take your pick with your coffee. Today I'm going to brew the Colombian Santa Rosa. Here's one I made earlier, a bit Art Attack style. I've got a ramekin of coffee pre-ground. So the recipe for brewing coffee is 16 grams for 250 milliliters of water. If you've got scales, that's great. If not, you're going to need 2 heaped tablespoons is 16 grams. So today I'm going to make 32 grams of coffee and I'm going to use 500 mils of water. So I'm brewing 2 cups. So I need to find someone to enjoy this with shortly. So we're going to put the coffee in the vessel. We're going to take our boiled water, so freshly off the boil, and we are going to pour 500 mils of water into the vessel. Perfect. I'm giving you a lot of numbers straight off the bat because it's important to be really precise in coffee. Coffee, rather than like cooking, it's quite like baking. So it's all about being really precise with your measurements, with your temperatures to get the very best balance out of your coffee. So If you don't have those means right now, that's fine. But the more precise you can be, the better quality you're going to get and the better consistency you're going to get to. So we have put the water in the vessel. We're going to give it a really good stir for 10 seconds, just to agitate that liquid as much as possible, get that brew going. I am going to take my plunger and lid and pop it in place. I'm not going to plunge just yet. We're going to put this to one side. And all I'm going to do now is set a timer for 5 minutes. The only thing you really need with a cafetiere is patience. So on any given morning, you walk off and do something else for 5 minutes. But the most important thing is to leave that for as long as possible to really get a good quality brew. So while that's brewing on the side, I'm going to tell you a bit about Pack Coffee, a bit about why we do what we do, some of the challenges that we're trying to address in the industry, and some of the success and some of the progress we've made so far and what happens next. So a bit of context first. Coffee is traded around the world as a commodity. So if you're familiar with commodities like oil, like tea, cocoa, sugar, coffee collectively is lumped together as one gross product. It's a very complex supply chain full of middlemen and actors who are all trying to take their slice. And at the start of it all, coffee farmers are not recognized or incentivized for quality. It's only about yield. So you can imagine really large estates can stand to earn quite a lot of money because they can produce a lot of coffee, but the vast majority of coffee farms are very small and family owned. So the reality of the industry is there are lots of farmers and communities who are exploited and actually trapped in poverty. So we were founded 9.5 years ago, looking at this fairly exploitative and imbalanced industry, and thought it's time to do something better. And even initiatives like Fair Trade, we believe, have had their day. So what we do and what we pioneered is something called direct trade. And what direct trade is we go out to origin, we meet farmers face to face, we work with them directly, and we agree contracts with them directly. So rather than importers and other middlemen, all of the money you spend on a brand like Packed Coffee, so much more of that is going directly to farmers and directly to the quality of the coffee itself. So we're really big on seasonality and buying small lots of super high quality instead of really high volumes of cheap rubbish, basically. So it's quite a different model to the way things have often been done. And it's fair to say it's rocked the boat in some ways. But for us, being a positive actor and addressing some of those imbalances in the industry, it's really exciting to see that similar brands who care about that ethos and doing good for people and planet are starting to follow suit. So when we agree to pay farmers, we pay them on average 65% higher than fair trade. So we're looking to go way above and beyond current standards to really incentivize great quality coffee. And finally, some of the really big players are doing the same thing. So it's amazing to see the whole industry very slowly shifting in a more ethical direction, because I think sustainability right now is a red hot consumer topic. And if you're not doing something as a business, no matter what you do, you're falling behind. So it's really important to be transparent and to demonstrate your values really clearly, be it your supply chain or your sourcing policy, or even the recyclability of your packaging and your takeaway cups and everything else you do in the supply chain. So I probably shouldn't tell you this, but it's to be confirmed very shortly. But we're about to be certified as a B Corp, which means we've passed very rigorous sustainability external kind of assessments, which is amazing. Our packaging is about to be 100% recyclable. That's changing over the next couple of weeks. And our roastery is about to be certified carbon neutral, which is quite a feat, given if you think about a massive machine that's roasting loads and loads of coffee, it's quite hard to make that environmentally efficient. So we've done an awful lot to make that work. So we're really proud of the things that we're doing, and we're really excited to be working in an industry which is finally waking up and doing better. So that's a bit about us in a nutshell. You may have heard of us before. We're big as an e-commerce brand, and we're about to celebrate our 10th birthday. I would like to say that we're very ambitious as a company, and we know that you can drink coffee in a number of different ways, be it in-home or out of home. So we're looking to revolutionize coffee and make it fairer and more sustainable, be it in pod format, be it in espresso, in wholesale, maybe even in retail on the supermarket shelf one day. But as long as we stick to our guns and do what's right, I know that we're on the right track. So that's what we're all about. So we are on 4 minutes and 21 seconds. So Before I do the final part of the brew, let me tell you about the similarities between the different coffees that we have today. So you have the Planalto, which is the Brazilian pulp natural coffee, and we have the Santa Rosa from Colombia. What they both are 100% Arabica. They are both specialty grade, which means very, very high quality, the top 0.1% of global traded coffee in terms of quality. And they're both single estate, which means sourced from a specific farm and farmer rather than region or country or something like that. So hyper traceable, hyper sustainable, hyper local. So depending on what you brewed or not, you're going to be able to compare one and the other. We've got to 5 minutes. So before we plunge, I'm just going to remove the plunger. I'm going to give this one final stir. You'll see that a lot of that coffee has formed a nice crust on top. So we're just going to stir that back in and do some final agitation. And then we're going to plunge the coffee. You should feel a good amount of pushback as you plunge. Make sure you do this nice and slowly and carefully. There we go. And we are ready. My scale is telling me off. We are ready to serve and enjoy. Good. So I gave you a couple of the similarities between the coffees, and they align with how we source coffee. Only Arabica, only specialty grade, only single estates are hyperlocal, and only through farmers that we work with every single year that we know and trust and who do an amazing job. The differences, if you brew the Planalto, the Brazilian, your coffee is a dark roast. It is also what we call a pulp natural process. That sounds a little bit complicated. I'll do the roasts first. So if you think about, sorry to the veggies and vegans, but when you ask for a steak in a restaurant, when you're asked whether you like yours kind of rare, medium rare, or well done, what you're asking for is the amount of kind of cooking characteristics impact on your flavor. It's the same principle in coffee. So a dark roasted coffee will have a lot of roasted characteristics, often flavors like chocolate, nuts, toffee and caramel, so very burnt sugars. If it's over roasted, it will be bitter and disgusting. But if it's roasted right but dark, it should be very heavy and rich. So the Planalto should taste very classic. The Santa Rosa Colombian coffee is a medium roast. So it's a nice balance between kind of chocolatey, classic flavor notes, but also some acidity. So the taste notes of the Santa Rosa are chocolate and orange. I think Terry's chocolate orange. I ate maybe 5 or 6 of those since Christmas. So I'm happy to keep living that dream through the coffee. Light roast coffees tend to be the most floral and bright and high acidity, and if you don't drink coffee very often, sometimes quite strange, to be honest. They can be really complex and don't have the heaviness that some people expect from coffee. So that's the difference between the roast profile. Now the process is the means by which, when you pick the coffee cherry off a tree, you remove the fruit layers to get that green bean inside ready for roasting. That's what the coffee bean is. With the washed coffee, you remove all of the fruit layers and have that bean washed, and it's really, really clean. It gives you a very bright, light, acidic flavor. So that's what the Colombian coffee should give you. The Brazilian coffee, you leave some of those fruit layers on the bean as you dry it out. And some of those some of the sugars in the fruit start to ferment and interact with the bean, which imparts often a very heavy, quite complex, almost jammy sort of sweetness. So that's what you should expect from the Brazilian coffee, heaviness and quite complex, heavy, jammy sweetness, compared to light and more acidic with the Colombian. So over to you as to which you prefer. It's all very subjective, what you may like and what you don't like. But those are the key differences, really, between the two. A couple of fun factoids I think you might enjoy. Water temperature has a really big impact on your resulting brew. So if you brew any coffee with water just off the boil, maybe 96 degrees, you're going to develop some of those roasty, heavy characteristics. If you leave it a bit longer, maybe a minute or a minute and a half, you're going to have a much more acidic kind of complex cup. So bear that in mind, depending on what you're looking for from your coffee. Sometimes slightly cooler water gives you a more complex and sweet cup. Another fun fact, filter coffee like cafetiere or like V60 AeroPress, these brew methods, is very different to espresso. So when you get a coffee from the coffee shop. With an espresso barista machine, it's all about very high pressure extracting solubles from the coffee. So you get a very concentrated, viscous, short cup. Compared to cafetiere, it's called an immersion brew. So there's no pressure at all acting on the coffee. It's just suspended in hot water, slowly brewing. The difference is people think espresso is high caffeine, but actually a cup of cafetiere coffee has about twice as much. because the longer the coffee brews for, the higher caffeine content there is. So it's a bit of a myth buster. So I'm conscious that it's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So beware that cafetiere coffee may be blowing your head off right now. I recommend cafetiere in the morning. And if you want something a bit milder in the afternoon, I would go for an espresso, to be honest, just in caffeine terms. So do bear that in mind. One final thing, the cafetiere and the mocha pot use a metal filter. Metal filters are much more coarse and give you quite a heavy, a lot of solubles in the drink. So quite an earthy flavor. That's what cafetiere is so delicious for. If you use a paper filter, like a V60 or an AeroPress, you get a really fine filtration and a really clean cup. So as you can imagine, I'm talking about lots of different variables. And once you know how all these different variables interact, that's how you really zero in on what you want out of your coffee. And hence, it gets more and more complex as you go down the rabbit hole. But in short, cafetiere is an amazing place to start. Really good fun, really simple, earthy, sort of classic coffee. And if you've got a big one like mine, best shared over breakfast. So I think that's all we've got time for. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you so much. If you want to share anything on social media, you can tag us at Packed Coffee. And if you want to find out any more about what we do, what we stand for, how we operate, you can go to packedcoffee.com and find all the information there, including our blogs and our full transparency documentation. So yeah, thanks for your time.
Well, thank you, George Bradley. That was brilliant. George, I learn something every time I hear from you. By the way, I realised, I have been playing along at home, you'll be pleased to hear, with my Santa Rosa. I'd been rushing it. I hadn't been waiting for 5 minutes.
Yeah. As I said, it's not complicated, but it demands something of you. So it's best to just leave it in and do something else, to be honest.
It depends who you're talking to. I mean, it was complicated for me. I've got one final question, George. I must let you go because we're going into a break. But Packed Coffee, I noticed, does decaf coffee. Does that make me a heretic if I have to tone down my caffeine intake?
Absolutely not. There is always time for decaf. And actually, we invest really heavily in our decaf because we want to cater for everybody. So there's always time for decaf. Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, look, you don't look like someone who had 6 Terry's chocolate orange over Christmas, but it's always good to see you. George Bradley, very good to reconnect. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who played along with that. As George says, we might have some coffee for you if you didn't make the initial cut. So let us know if you'd like some of that. We're going to take a break here at EnergyTech Annual. We will be back, if you're watching live, we'll be back at 4:10 GMT. And we'll be talking about the art of the impossible. Have you ever been told that what you're doing just cannot be done? I've got the next panel coming right up, followed by our final keynote from the person who coined the term micromobility. Actually, I'll say that very clearly. We'll be back at 4:05. 4:05. See you then. Until after the break, goodbye. Just joining us. If you are rejoining us after the break, then thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ollie Barrett, and this is the annual Energy Tech event brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs and Codebase and Opportunity Northeast. Well, my mind is already absolutely blown, and not just because of the very good packed coffee that we've been enjoying in the break. Bob Mumgard from Commonwealth Fusion Systems has just raised $1.8 billion. And when I asked him for a piece of advice to budding entrepreneurs, his first word was audacity. That got me thinking. I'm grateful to colleagues from Sellafield for showing us why we use robotics in our day-to-day work. Simply put, there are some jobs that are too dangerous, not to mention too dirty, for humans to engage with, but really pushing boundaries on that one. And I'm very grateful to you for tuning in and for asking such brilliant questions. Special note, top of the class, Philip, the former physics teacher. I'm especially grateful. I always love people who ask brilliant questions. So I'm very grateful to anyone who fires questions my way or the panel's way. Lots of good stuff still to come. Here's a question for you tuned in. Have you ever been told that something you're working in is impossible, can't be done, won't be done, is impossible given the time constraints or budget constraints? If you do, I think you might like this next panel. Let's introduce our next guests to you as we see them appear on the screen. It's very good to see them all joining me. Insia, Jennifer and Mert, a very warm welcome to you. Let me tell you who's here. Jennifer Holmgren of Lanza Tech. Good afternoon to you. Insia Jafferji of the Shellworks. Hello, Insia. Lovely to see you again. And Mert Gaveci. Have I got that right, Mert Gaveci?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Director of Digital Technologies at Malta Inc. Here, one and all, to discuss the art of the impossible. Why don't we just get straight into it? But before we do, in the abstract, let's get some more on what you're each up to. Jennifer, tell us more. Lanza Tech, you're in the business, I think, partly of carbon recycling. Tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. So what we do is we take waste carbon emissions, like at a steel mill, or even solid emissions at a municipal solid waste site, and we convert them through to fuels and chemicals. So we've been able to fly on aviation fuel made from recycled carbon emissions. Zara introduced a dress. So basically our mission is to absolutely transform where the carbon in all of your products comes from. We want it to come from waste, not fresh fossils.
Yeah, you're quite a legend at doing this, Jennifer. What do you think it is about you that draws you to tough problems?
I like platforms, and I really love putting steel in the ground.
Yeah, exactly. No, good riddance. So, Insia, tell me a bit more. You're part of the war on plastic. How?
Yeah, so I guess our vision is to create a plastic-free future. The way that we're aiming to do that today is we've created a material from microbes. And what's amazing about it is that they build up this material energy storage just as we would have fat in our body. But when you create it into a product and throw it away, the same microbes see it as food in a natural soil or marine environment and break it down, preventing the pollution that we see today.
So hang on, when we talk about microbes, this is effectively taking bacteria and turning them into a new product.
Exactly, yeah. So
hang on, where are you getting the bacteria from then?
So it comes from those solid marine environments. So it's almost like you take the bacteria that do this already, and then when you throw your products away, the same bacteria see it as food and break it down.
Love it. So give us an example of where you've got it and something that you've created.
So one of the areas is actually wastewater municipal sludge, because they're really hardy. They have to survive, and so they're really good at doing this. And then some of the products that we've created from it today are, things like these little bottles or bottle caps. These are kind of our first use cases that we've created.
Love it. Municipal sludge. That's a sanitized way of describing it, isn't it? Jennifer, it sounds like Insia is a fellow traveller, actually. I think you'd get on.
Yeah.
Now tell me something, Mert. Is it true that Malta Inc. span out of Google's moonshot factory?
Yeah, it certainly is. If you look at the idea, it's basically a collection of established technologies that are maybe 20, 30 years old, put together in a different way. So the original idea, it was the brainchild of a Stanford professor who's also a Nobel laureate. And in 2015, it became a project at Google X. And, the way X works is basically they try to find everything that will kill an idea. So they spent 2 years trying to kill the idea, techno-economics, from a technical perspective, but it survived. And in 2018, it was spun off as an independent company. Our CEO, Ramya Swaminathan, led the spin-off out of Google X and the Series A fundraise. And here we are, about 3 years later.
Well, hang on, though. That's that's a whistle-stop tour. But just how involved were you in those very early stages? Because you've got an extremely accomplished record in larger corporates. Were you involved in that genesis? Because I'm very interested by that tension of poking at the impossible but trying to kill it off as well. That seems like a tension.
Yeah, so it certainly was. And again, I feel like, I never worked for X, and I wasn't around for when Malta was a part of X. but there's definitely, they are in the business of finding the impossible, right? So, if we, go back and look at what they were doing, and they were exactly actually, in general, what they were trying to do was their approach is to prove that something is impossible so that they can eliminate it. They kind of take pride in how many ideas they eliminate on a given year. And because the ones that survive essentially are the stronger ones. I did not join the company until middle of 2019. So, startups, things kind of come in waves. Series A fundraise. I was a part of that first wave, which makes me an old timer at a startup like Malta, which I realized just a few weeks back when I say, "Well, I've been here for almost 3 years." Oh yeah, you've been here for a while. So, but yeah,
it's all relative. All right.
What's that?
No, carry on, Matt.
I was just going to say, when I came along, what was seen as impossible was probably still around the market. There's no need, or, this is never going to be cost competitive, both the product itself and your charging electricity, right? Because our system takes electricity, stores it, and then discharges it. If you don't have cheap, renewable electricity coming in, then you don't really have much of a function. But we're at a point where that case is so well established that impossible for most people is gone. It's more around how do we store that cheap electricity and how do we make it always available? That's the question, and that's the problem we're trying to solve.
Right. So it's about energy storage. But tell me, where does sort of heat and cold come into this then, Mert? Because you've got different ways that you can work, right?
Yeah. So what we do is, let's just think about offshore wind, right? So your offshore wind may be blowing, at really high speed and be making a lot of electricity for 2 days in a row. And on the third day, the wind might just die, like it happened in the UK back in September, where you might have a month or two of very low average wind speed. So that means there isn't a lot of wind output. So what our system does is when the wind is blowing at full speed, you have excess electricity. We take that excess electricity, we run a heat pump with it. It's essentially like your air conditioning at home, just very, very large and going to high and low temperatures on each side. And then what we do is we heat up a molten salt. So that's basically just your typical salt, but it's in a liquid form. That's our hot fluid. And then we have a coolant, like the coolants in your car, on the cold side, and we cool that down. So to give you an idea, on the hot side, it's 565 degrees Celsius. On the cold side, -60. So it's very hot and very cold. And that's what our heat pump does. And when the wind dies, then it's time, and the grid needs the electricity back because, you need to turn on your oven or the heat in your home. We reverse the cycle and we run what's called the heat engine. It's the opposite of that very same cycle. And we convert that temperature differential on the hot side and the cold side back to electricity. Very similar to how a thermal power plant works today. It's just that we don't burn anything. We just use the heat that we pumped during the charging stage.
Yes, got it. No, thank you, Mert. So let's dig into this because there's so much that I want to ask you about this topic. Jennifer, ever been told something's impossible?
I get told something's impossible pretty much every day. I can start historically. I remember in 2005 being told that nobody would ever be able to fly on a drop-in replacement sustainable aviation fuel, that only petroleum fossil-derived aviation fuel would ever be used commercially. 5 years later, we had not only made sustainable aviation fuel, we had actually flown an F-18, the Green Hornet, on Earth Day 2010. It went supersonic. So 5 years from it can't be done to it's being done. The same thing on aviation when I came to LanzaTech. And we decided that, the cheapest waste-derived feedstock would be ethanol, that we could take waste and turn them into ethanol, and ethanol would become the carbon and the energy carrier that we could then convert those wastes through to jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel, a hydrocarbon. And everybody said, well, that's just ridiculous because it takes more gallons of ethanol than the hydrocarbon jet fuel. But we're doing it now, and everybody realizes that on a BTU basis, you're actually better off making the hydrocarbons. So you're not losing anything starting with ethanol, and that ethanol is the right intermediate. And again, it's just the problem is that if people haven't done it before and it seems disruptive, it's so easy for the guy on the couch to just say, hey, it's never going to work, right? So over and over again, we prove them wrong.
And Jennifer, on reflection, when you're going through those chapters in your life, to what extent did you believe it could be done? Or did you simply hope it could be done, but in truth, you didn't really know either?
Well, I mean, as long as it doesn't violate a law of thermodynamics, it can be done, right? I mean, the science, as long as the science is sound, right, then really it comes down to getting it done and making sure the economics works. That's always the question, right? Yes, you tackle it because you know it can be done. And then the question is, can it be done in a way that makes market sense, economic sense? So, right. No, it's not a hope. Hope isn't enough.
Okay, got it, right. Insia, how do you tackle this word? You've been told what you're doing is impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, everything you said, Jennifer, really resonates, because I think maybe we hear a similar word, but maybe I thought, on contrast, I could talk about an early story when it was just three of us in the shed, and we were like, yep, we're going to start this business, and we got £20,000, and everyone was like, there's no way that you can build a business on £20,000, especially a hardware business, right? But I think fundamentally, I think it's just, it's about a framework. So if you have a goal and a set of challenges, you learn how to problem solve that within those set of constraints. So for us, it was £20,000. We had to create products. So we went to scrap yards. We got aluminum. We melted it down. We made some molds, and then we made the products. And I think that's kind of the approach we apply to every so-called impossible problem, is like there's a set of constraints and a problem we need to solve. Like, how do we get to that end result?
Yeah, it's a great reframe, isn't it? It's actually driving your resourcefulness and your entrepreneurship. Mert, what does that word impossible trigger in you?
It probably triggers challenges around scale, right? So, our particular technology, you can build a small version of it, but, the obvious advantage is if you build a really big one. So, when we came into this industry, the assumption was that, well, you're a startup. The word hard tech, it's not even enough in some ways to define what we do, because it's hard tech and it's at very large scale. So the first plant that we want to build is 100 megawatts. So it is a grid scale. So even to build the first plant, you need to be able to scale very large equipment. So that was always the question. How will you be able to come to this market and have this large equipment, without coming in on the low end, with smaller equipment? And really for us, the key to unlocking that was our partners. So, yes, we could not build a factory to build, hundreds of megawatts worth of turbo machinery. We don't have the capital to do that, but Siemens does. So, we were basically able to leverage the changes in the industry. The equipment we need looks kind of like a combined cycle power plant gas turbine. So, and who makes that? Well, there are, several companies in the world who can do that. So we partnered with those companies, and
right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, Jennifer, isn't it? Because there's a temptation, isn't there, in business to say we've got it all figured out and just watch this space. Whereas Mert's hinting at an openness, a vulnerability that says there might be some things which we'll find, if not impossible, then very challenging. And that can be attractive.
Well, I mean, that's what science loves to do, right? That, like I said, I love to put steel on the ground, which means I love to scale, right? And so as long as we believe something is possible, then it's really just about a method, right? It really is about the tactics to get from an idea to an experiment in the lab, to a pilot plant, to a demonstration plant, and then to that. And, there's a lot of rules of the road, I think, that one needs to be very cognizant about. I always like to say what you don't want to do is build $100 million boat anchor. And that's really the big problem, right? When you're scaling, that if you want to be aggressive and you want to go fast, but you can't skip fundamental steps that teach you along the path. So there's, I think, a lot that needs to be done and needs to be done right. And so while I know we're all talking about all these things that are impossible, we just plow on, yes, but that doesn't mean the sound science, the sound engineering, the sound biology. You need to listen to those voices, at least.
So what I'd like from each of you then is a technique, because I would say that for many of the people that have told you something's impossible, they haven't really, with all due respect, mattered. You could afford to ignore them, to move on, to say, I'll see you when we cross the success threshold. Other people you need to convince. How do you do that? Insia?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting word, convince, because I think I've never wanted to convince someone of anything. I've just wanted to present the facts of what's possible. So I think actually Jennifer said it in a really great way. So when we were going out, whether it be fundraising, I'm a first-time founder, I'm quite, I look young, people don't think I have the experience, like how do you know how to do these things? How do you know that the science is sound? A lot of different questions. But I think what I've always done is I listen to all those questions and then I collect data and information and I present it in a very clear and concise way, because ultimately what I'm hearing is that not that you don't think the tech is possible, it's you can't understand it. So how do I make it so that you can actually understand it and digest it so that it makes sense? And I think that's something I try to do again and again.
Yeah, it is a really interesting point, Mert, that it becomes a challenge of communication. What technique would you bring in response to that question?
Was that to me, Ali?
Yeah, particularly when you've had somebody that said, Mert, I don't believe you. And you realize that this person has to be, well, to use Insia's framing, educated, if that's not too passive aggressive.
Yeah, like different parts of my career, I've taken different approaches to that. I feel like the approach that I used to take was to, bury them in data and analysis. And then later on, I started to kind of realize that alone, for me, wasn't enough. Because usually the sticking point, I find that the technical points one can get through if you can build the confidence. So that takes time, but you can do it, kind of what Insia alluded to. You build that confidence if you're, always straightforward about the information you present. You build that confidence. But then there is the more subjective pieces, the economical pieces, right? So those are based on, projections of what is going to happen with markets and demand. This is something we struggle with in energy storage. Back in 2014, I was in this business with a battery design at GE, and that didn't work out. And it wasn't really the technology. So then you're really encouraging people to look at a crystal ball, and you look at the crystal ball that's in front of you and believe the crystal ball that's in front of you. So that's the point where I think the discussion is a little softer, where I think that word audacity kind of starts to come in, and you basically try to help people to vision a different future. But I try to reserve that for non-technical things. The non-technical things, just like Jennifer said, we should be able to show them. That machine should be spinning. We shouldn't be doing, PowerPoint engineering. You can always convince people if you can make the machine work at a smaller scale. Those stories are easier to tell. The economic stories, those are the ones that are maybe, for me as an engineer, that are harder to tell.
Yeah, got it. And Jennifer, I'm reluctant to move on because I suspect you're a martial artist on people standing in your way. So help me understand how you've disarmed them.
Well, I mean, it depends. I think you said it well when you said that sometimes you don't have to convince people, you just move on. So the image in my head is always the penguins in Madagascar, smile and wave both. always smile and wave, right? So there are a lot of times when all you can do is smile and wave and say, okay, thank you very much, and go off and get the data. At the end of the day, I think as you both said earlier, it's not about PowerPoint engineering. That's very eloquent comment, by the way. I love it. It's not about PowerPoint engineering. It's about actually building and running something. So my first piece is you don't need to convince everybody. And the ones you don't need to convince, just keep moving. Then on the other side of the equation, you've got to focus on the yeses. You're going to kiss a lot of frogs. And that's the only way I can think about it. And so what you've got to do is find the yeses, get the glimmer of understanding, and then disarm them and let them really fully join you on the journey. The ones that are saying no, you can't do it. I've never been that smart and that convincing.
Excellent. No, thank you, Jennifer. So just before we move on from that thought, Mert and Insia, Shannon asks, particularly on the people that might have said no initially, are there any surprising outcomes and use cases of your technologies that came from pushing past a no? Or are you really in Jennifer's camp here of saying, move on? Any reflection on that?
I think for me, there's always value in a no. And I think whether it pushes the product to be defined in a different way, or you to communicate in a different way, or you understand your audience better, like Jennifer mentioned. So I think for me, there's value in the no's because it just makes me more robust through my thought process and growth.
Okay, and how do you respond to that question? Ever pushed past that to a surprising outcome?
Not necessarily pushing past through it. I kind of feel like you generally go around it, but then that comes back as a lesson to you, right? When, back in 2020, right in the beginning of a pandemic, we were starting our Series B fundraise. This was the first time I was involved in such a process, and our CEO, Rami, she coached me, basically said, look, we're going to talk to a lot of people. You're going to hear a lot of no's, and you need to be, that's how this process works. And then she was like, I'm sure you're not used to this, but we will probably talk to hundreds of people, and you need 5 investors. That's how many you need. But the thing is, that experience of 195 no's or whatever that was, if you actually absorb why, in many of those cases, why those are no's, next time around, you might be able to turn that around. They change their minds. Yes. The market evolves, right? Between 2020 and now, the electricity markets, the approach to electricity markets have changed dramatically.
Yes.
And then on top of that, we have learned, right, in terms of what was missing in our story and our path forward, what the investors were looking, what the market is looking for. And we have a very different story, even though it's the same product, same markets, we're trying to do the exact same thing,
right?
But we have a very different way of telling it.
I think it's a brilliant point, not to take a no as the chance to lose touch. There's a real nuance there, which I found fascinating. All right, well, so let's get really honest then. What about impossible today? What remains the wicked problem that you continue to face? That could be as a company, it could be more broadly across the industry. Jennifer, get us thinking. Be as blunt as you like.
Okay. Well, I think our current problem is time. If you think about the evolution of process technologies or new technologies, you go through a fundamental learning and prototyping, and you build the first one phase. And then once you build the first one, you build a couple more, you improve them, and then you reach that exponential diffusion part of the curve, right? And you saw that with solar. That sort of takes 30 years, right? You get to the point where people are complaining, it's still 10 years out and it will always be 10 years out. And then all of a sudden it goes from that to boom, exponential growth. You can't turn around till you see it. But that takes, for a disruptive idea, 30 plus years. We are in a race against time. There is no question that we have to bend the carbon curve, 50% reduction by 2030. And we haven't even flattened the curve. right? Now we've got 8 years to go from this to this. And we can't afford 30 years anymore. So to me, it's about scaling faster, crossing the valley of death, first commercial scale, faster, and diffusing faster. And that's the thing. I mean, that should terrify us, but it should also be exciting, right? Because it gives us all an opportunity to be better and faster. But that's the challenge.
Now, Mer, I'm sure that a lot of that will resonate. What about for you at Malta Inc.? What remains, quote, impossible?
I mean, it's exactly what Jennifer said, right? So in terms, for us as a company, the fundamentals of this market are here, right? The cheap electricity is here. The need for dispatchable electricity is definitely here. We will be okay. We have a product that works for this market. Just at the pace that solar and wind came in, we will come in. So for us as a company, it's not what's impossible. But that pace, we're still going to go at the pace we did it before, and we're not necessarily going to be accelerating to that pace that we need to accelerate to. And that's really the challenge, right? So the whole market is full of 30-year assets. Some of those 30-year assets are being installed today. There are, coal and gas assets that are being installed today. That means they have certain economic realities associated with those. That's steel in the ground, right? Even if, what's coming is already cheaper, even before you think about carbon. But that pace is 30, 40, 50 years because, often it's cheaper to operate an asset you already have in the ground. So, and then think about our regulations, right? Our regulators are used to working at a certain pace, and they just need to outpace the market by this much. But now they need to outpace climate change. That's basically, they need to get in front of that. So that means that in order to enable a much faster transition, everybody has to move differently. So, I'll just say that again, right? We'll be okay as a company, but what we're trying to, accomplish as a mission for the planet, that's the hard one. That pace is, we've never done that before.
Yeah, no, understood. Insia, your thoughts on this?
So I completely agree with Mert and both Jennifer. I think that's one of the challenges with building complex technology and trying to scale it rapidly while also waiting for the market to adopt it. So there's that tricky balance that you're playing. But I think another one is mistrust sometimes, I find. So at least in our industry, there have been a lot of people who have tried to solve this problem before or have eliminated conceptually that this problem might exist. And so, we're kind of fighting against the largest, for example, people thought something was biodegradable and then it turned out it wasn't. So we're fighting against that conception, both from a large corporation perspective, who are really afraid to do that again, but also from a consumer perspective, because now they don't understand what they're looking for, right? And so that's kind of one challenge that we're really up against, is how do you communicate something where there's so much misinformation already provided, and how do you communicate so clearly that people will understand it and do the right thing?
So what you're hinting at there, Insia, is this idea that large global corporates might have lost legitimacy in some cases, and through not being straight with their customers.
I think so. And I think it's also due to what information that they had at the time, right? So it wasn't that they were trying to create mistrust, but it has created a lot of mistrust. And often those are the corporations that people go to understand something new. So it's kind of caused a little bit of imbalance, at least in our industry, where the thought leaders are now being critiqued. And it's great opportunities for startups, but it also is a challenge in itself for us.
Yeah. Jennifer, let me ask you a question it sits to the side of impossibility, but when you've had a relationship with a very large corporate over your career, whether that's at LanzaTech or beyond, what has been at the core of the success of that healthy relationship? What has it really boiled down to? Because that's what we're trying to get to across this whole event today.
Well, and actually, every relationship is the same, right? Whether it's with a large corporate or your spouse, right? Relationship is based on building trust, right? And it's trust and respect for each other. And I think, as Encia said, it's very hard sometimes with working with a corporate, because actually they have to align themselves internally, because inside their corporations, they're the ones saying no. And so you've got your champion that you build trust with, but you have to build trust across many levels. So I actually think that for a small company, it's super important to work with the large players because they have access to markets, they have supply chains, but it's a little bit like dancing with an elephant. And so you've got to be really careful in how you do it. And again, it's all about trust in my mind.
Yeah, I wondered whether we were going to have another Madagascar quote come out there. I'm just hoping we won't remind ourselves what the monkeys encouraged themselves to do. But anyway, you've sat on both sides of this, if I can put it like that. What would your message be to somebody from a very large corporation on the call that wanted to help startups navigate through the sort of impossible straits and have a better relationship, drawing on your GE experience?
You know, I was hoping you were going to ask me the opposite, because I have 1,000, lines that I can give to somebody who's at a startup because I was on that other side for so long. And I feel like for an individual on the corporate side, it's a little harder, right? Because there is a whole bureaucracy to navigate and, how they help. And I think it's mostly around trying to understand, to help. It's more about communications than anything else. So I feel like on the corporate side, yes, you already know the methods to break the barriers because you try to break them for your own ideas, unless you've given up on things. But, I wasn't. So basically trying to, you know how to unlock the doors. So you help the startups unlock those doors. But I think the way you can help a little bit extra to the people on the startup side of it is trying to walk them through that maze that is that large corporation, because it isn't obvious, what the decision mechanisms are, and people who look very confident and they look like they're in charge, it turns out they're not, right? So the way to actually read in somebody's eye that they're not in charge, that is a skill that I think you can only really be taught by somebody who's been there.
Now we're getting down to it, but I can hear someone heckling, going, "Give us the one tip for the startup too, because we can't go without it." Just number one, go for it.
I think it's just the opposite of that. Basically, trying to figure out how to basically decode the power structures in a corporation like that, because you're going to, just because somebody seems interested and keeps talking to you doesn't mean they actually have the keys to the doors you need them to open. And then the other part of it is, again, I think, there's a lot about empathy that comes in business, trying to understand what's happening on the other side, not just trying to figure out how you're going to get yours done, but you first need to understand what's happening on the other side and what makes that corporation tick, right? And often it's not what you think. It may not even seem logical to you what's going to make that corporation tick, but it's about finding that key.
Yeah, got it. So we've just got 1 minute remaining. Jennifer, I don't want to end on a downer, but what do you say to somebody tuned in who is slightly feeling overwhelmed by the impossible, whichever their role within a startup or large corporate, that you must have had days a bit like that? What do you say to them? Oh no, Jennifer, just come off mute for me.
I'll never be as eloquent as that again. For me, the simple thing to tell an entrepreneur who's having a bad day is, you can do it. I know you can do it. I know you will do it. Just go do it.
Yeah. I mean, hard to top that, Encia, but I've got to know you a bit, and I know you work within one of the world's great companies, Apple, before starting the Shell Works. What do you say?
I think build a community. It takes a village to build something, and especially if you're trying to do something really difficult, which often you are if you're an entrepreneur, then build a community. There's people who will help you get there.
Yeah, and I can sense if we were all in a room together, my colleagues at Eagle Labs would be cheering on that final answer. Mert, Insia, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Really great to see you. I hope to see you back in person one day very soon. Really interesting topic, that. The impossible. What is impossible? What remains impossible? Build a community. As Jennifer says, you can do it. How very interesting. Thank you very much for your questions and reflections. I'm not quite sure where the time has gone this afternoon at this EnergyTech Annual, but it's time for our final speaker. Brilliant fact about our next speaker. They coined the term micromobility. How fantastic is that? Describing, of course, shared vehicles weighing less than 500 kilograms. Today, I think they're going to talk a bit about the opportunities that micromobility presents in the energy transition and also the journey towards zero carbon transport. So I guess what we're all wondering is, where's the pressure? Where's the real drive going to come for this? And I have a theory that Horace Dedier, our final speaker, will argue that it might not come from the power players in government. Maybe it's going to come from percolating up from the grassroots, but let me not steal their thunder. I'll be listening intently. It's the second time we're honoured to welcome him back to our screens. Horace Dedier, welcome to our EnergyTech event. It's so good to be joined by you again.
Oh, yes, thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm in the East Coast of the United States, and we're having very cold weather, but it's been an optimistic look at the next year here from sort of micromobility world, and we're super excited to share with you guys today.
100%. Well, we're all ears, and just on a personal note, from Brits to Americans, we can't wait to get the British-American relationship firing on all cylinders again. We've missed being in each other's countries, so thank you for rejoining us, and we're in your very capable hands, Horace Dedier.
Well, thanks again. And this is a kind of a deep dive into micromobility. I'm going to make it very quick, but the whole point here is to give you a perspective on how to think about these opportunities in general. It's the whole question of like, how do you disrupt? How do you how do you create a new market? How do you act as an entrant against incumbents and so on? I think micromobility encapsulates a lot of that. I was introduced as this idea of sort of very lightweight vehicles, sometimes shared, sometimes owned, actually. We're not exclusive to sharing only, but this idea of the small, the meek, the modest, the humble, being much more interesting as an opportunity versus what we think of as the establishment. A lot of talk about electric cars, a lot of talk about EVs, infrastructures for EVs, and so on. But let's think a little bit about something that is suitable for short distances, very adequate for, 1 or 2 passengers. It's very, very comfortable for short trips. And it's not just bikes and scooters. We're seeing a huge explosion of form factors. We're seeing innovation coming from taking parts off the shelf, communication parts, motor and electric drive, plus battery technology, bringing them to a small form factor, making them available for jobs to be done that are sort of pervasive in urban environments. And so we're seeing an explosion in form factors, similar to what we saw with the smartphone actually in its early years, and with the personal computer in its early years. And it's all about the low end of the market. Now, what is the market? Is it speed, power, performance in transportation? Is it range, as we're led to believe by automakers? No, it's actually distances to travel. This is the job to be done, A to B in time C. Turns out that there's a lot more short trips out there than long trips, and the short trips are the ones that are overserved by the incumbents, by the automakers with 400-kilometer range cars with 3,000 kilogram vehicles. So the familiar solutions we have, the bikes and the scooters. But as I said, there's a plethora of opportunity in looking at different form factors. And all of that is made possible by enabling technologies that have been developed over decades. Again, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you should be thinking, I don't want to do a moonshot. I want to pick up off-the-shelf pieces, putting together in a new and novel way. And that's exactly what's happening here. And in fact, what happened with the PC industry early on, it wasn't really about developing entirely new, processor architectures. It was more about assembly. And what's driving it, as I said, short distances, but there's also the fact that urbanization, this is all public data. This has all been building for decades. Just things are ramping up in terms of number of people living in cities. Again, the predominance of short distances, the economic opportunity that small trips provide in terms of utility, but in terms of joy and pleasure as well, and the emission mandates. And this is more of a force that's acting on the whole industry. So emissions and the need to deal with carbon have been an increasing part of the discussion. It wasn't the case 3 years ago when this whole space began, but now we're starting to see that this actually does do a great job there. Now, starting at the low end, why should you look at the low end? Well, again, as I said, there's a lot more opportunity there that's invisible. It's not something we measure correctly. We look at performance in the wrong way. We also should be thinking about, how to bring that service to people, as sharing does. And car sharing, although it's possible to, imagine a future there, we're seeing how long it's taking. You can wait and see, and you can see the patterns over more than a decade of what's happened there. And at the same time, you see the rise of shared vehicles that are small as being so much faster. Now, one other thing I want to throw out there is how do you think about where to play in this space? Or whatever space you might be in. Well, again, I'm borrowing heavily from the history here. Phone business and the PC business, they developed what are called stacks. This is a way to think about where you are in the hierarchy of technology solutions. And although we think about the vehicles, maybe with the sharing as the service network, but there's all these other things. There's potential platforms, there's apps, there's data, there's insurance, there's platforms potentially, there's safety considerations, there's accessories, all these other things. Well, let's put them in the stack. And if you do that everywhere from components at the very bottom, just like you might think of microprocessors, devices, operators above that, right? The phone business, platforms, iOS and Android, and then applications, the app stores, and everything else. This is how that stack built. Now, if you look at micromobility, it's very similar scenario shaping up. Components, devices, operators, platforms, which are still to be determined, but they will come. And finally, applications and services on top. Again, the idea here is to segment, identify opportunity, look at the value chain, and stack things up. And if you did that, you would be looking at, already hundreds of companies that are putting themselves in these clusters. We at Micromobility Industries actually have a collection of all of the members of the community, and we are able to look through their interests and identify these clusters. And so 700 different companies. And here I'm just going to pop up a lot of the icons here, or logos, but you can see just how many players there are in these categories. Everything from retail, operators, etc. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's over 700. The next thing I want to throw out there is this idea that things don't all happen at once. There's a sequence to the adoption of this technology. You have low end, early, or you have early adopters, then you have middle and late. As you know, this is called the diffusion curve, or the adoption of technology, the story of adoption and diffusion. And what's interesting is when you look at that and you should ask yourself, am I early? Am I late? When should I act? If you're big, if you're small, you should think about mapping the S curve for this particular opportunity. By the way, another thing, and I know it was mentioned early on, is what is the role of government? Where does the mandate come from? Is this going to be a top-down or a bottom-up approach? As you can see already, and I hope this is coming through implicitly, this is a bottom-up approach. It's not going to come from mandates from above. There will be cities that will be proactive. There will be cities that are progressive in governments, etc. But most of it is a reaction to an invention that someone else came up with, probably in the private sector. And what we're seeing is exactly this phenomenon. And the resistance, in fact, is from the incumbents. The resistance is along the lines, well, the world is the way it is. We can't change it. Infrastructures are very expensive to change. But bear in mind that infrastructures are sunk costs, in the sense that if you built the world according to an obsolete form factor, an obsolete technology, an obsolete emissions model, it's time to get rid of it. And you're much better off building something new than trying to preserve the old. And this is common sense, but it's hiding within the jargon of the industry, which says that you need to somehow, preserve. We've always done it this way. There's so many billions of dollars in infrastructure. We can't just erase that, or we can't get rid of it. Of course you can. How did it get there in the first place? What was there before it? So a lot of that has to be thought of in terms of like how to have a conversation with the the powers that be. Again, it's happened over and over again. And you look at the auto industry, you look at transportation in general, you look at trucking, and you look at shipping, you look at naval aviation. All of these infrastructures, all of these stories have played out in similar ways. An invention, usually on the device side, would cause a reevaluation of what's sufficient, and then a rebuilding of infrastructures. And we've gone this over and over again. The UK is actually a leader in many of these cases. Historically, the canals, the rail systems, and in navy or shipping in general. So I don't want to belabor the point, but there are S-curves in terms of adoption times. You need to plan and act accordingly. So in my, there are some things which are fast and some things which are slow. And I'm just going to, I'm not going to go through the, all the dozens of examples. There's over 140 actual diffusion curves I've studied, but I'm going to try to plot the micromobility diffusion curve and where we are along that line. And I think that arrow that you see here represents where we are right now. It still mostly needs to be built. We're looking at a 10 to 15 year time cycle right now. And that has to coincide with this opposite diffusion curve, which is the carbon curve. This is where we need to be in a certain time frame. And you have to ask, is this solution adequate in this time frame? What about the alternatives? What about electric mobility? What about other energy systems? It's all happening right now as we speak. And COVID has only accelerated things. I think that's about all the time I have, but happy to have a conversation. Anybody wants to hit me up on Twitter at Asimco. Let's get this going.
Horace, as ever, that was first class. Can you hear me, Horace, by the way?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you. I've got just a couple of super quick questions for you. Thank you. Horace, if you and I had access to a TARDIS and we could go to any corner of the globe and you wanted to take us somewhere now and go, look on the ground here, this is a clue about the future of micromobility, where would you take us?
Okay, I'm a big believer in bottom-up solutions, actually starting in places that are actually, let's say, the least developed, who have the least competition from incumbents. So one place I'd go is India. It's not so much there's a lot of electric mobility there, but there's a lot of micromobility in the form of two-wheelers, the largest two-wheeler market in the world. It's very low price for transport, or low willingness to pay for transportation. You could also look at China, but China is actually getting too much development in automobility. But if you look at India and ask yourself, what would happen if all these small vehicles were to turn electric, 2 and 3 wheels? It's unbelievable, the opportunity. Mobilizing 1 billion people very quickly with electric mobility, that would be the place to go. Possibly also Africa.
Yeah, interesting. So you clearly believe in the next generation of startups. Just to look at this house, knowing what you know, you're one of the world's leading analysts of some of the major tech companies. Any you know full well is eyeing up this space and wants to be associated in our mind with micromobility?
Sorry, you broke up a bit. Which names would be associated with it?
Yeah, or it's on their roadmap that we should watch this space because they're coming for it.
Okay, so mostly it's startups. There's very few incumbents that are actually, even tech incumbents. I'd be looking at the big 5 like Google, Apple, Amazon, etc. Now you might ask, what do they have to do with it? What about Maps? Maps is a it's like the browser of micromobility. If Google were to get onto this space, it wouldn't be by shipping a vehicle. What they would do is they'd say, hey, if you're an operator providing a service, participate in an auction to get surfaced as one of the ways to travel A to B. So if somebody types in the destination in their maps, you should be participating in an auction to bid on that trip being assigned to you. And that type of mobility search is going to be very interesting. If you look at Amazon, same thing. How would they change their infrastructure, especially in urban areas, to take advantage of these electric vehicles? They're doing vans and trucks now, but they could very well do bikes and quads, which are smaller and more efficient. Apple could be in the device business, but it also could be in the helmet business. It could be in the wearable business. All of these things that would enhance the experience wouldn't necessarily have to be at the device side. That's why when you look up the S-curve, it's like they're probably going to come in like towards the middle to the end of the adoption curve with these parts of the stack that are above the device. Possibly they could get into the device business, but that's, I think, less likely.
Yeah, fascinating predictions. Thank you, Horace. Just time for one very brief question from the audience. Do you see any difficulties with acceptance of new technologies by an aging population, especially with increase in lower age dementia? It's a serious challenge with aging populations.
Absolutely, but you know, one of the things that's been pointed out to me is that if you look at Germany, the e-bike is actually have early adopters among the elderly. And this is because they kind of, aren't looking for making the same kind of trips that when you're working, you'd see those types of longer distances. So it's more for leisure. And if you think about that, there's ways to make it easy for the elderly, easy for the disabled to actually participate. A lot of that has to do with infrastructure. Unfortunately, we have to play that chicken and egg game. But it's not exclusive to the young and exclusive to the highly athletic. It might be seen that way in the UK, but if you look around again, you'll see differences in Finland, which is also where I maintain a residence. In the northern parts of Finland, it's extremely common for children to ride, even in the winter, to school on their bikes.
Yeah, amazing. So much food for thought there. Horace, we're so grateful to you for your time. Thank you for rejoining us, and let's please keep in touch. Horace Dedje, thank you so much. It brings us to the end there with a sort of global perspective and a glimpse into the future. I just wanted to give you a very brief couple of tips, if you like, at the end of this session. Firstly, if you're not already part of our EnergyTech community, then please stand by for more information about how to get more fully signed up. They'll have an email out to you in the next few days. That's the first thing. The second thing is this whole recording will be available. We'll send round the link for you. Of course, you can watch it again if you'd like to, but also if there's anyone you think should watch all or some of it, please do pass it on or share on social channels. That would be much appreciated. Finally, some of you have expressed an interest in the networking aspect of the program, particularly thanks to our partners at Codebase, and we're going to be in touch about that in the next few days as well. So all that remains is for me to say a big thank you. So much work behind the scenes from Barclays Eagle Labs, from Codebase, and from our partners at Opportunity Northeast. Thank you to them. I get the easy bit, really, presenting to you today, but I've hugely enjoyed it. Secondly, thank you to each and every one of our brilliant speakers for being pithy and concise and inspiring without exception. Really grateful to them. And finally, thank you to you. You're busy. You've got lots of demands on your time and attention. Thank you for tuning in to at least some, if not all, of today. I really appreciate it. So from everyone on the EnergyTech team, thank you for tuning in. Please do spread the word if you've enjoyed any or all of today. And until next time, from me, Ollie Barrett, it's goodbye.